What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Awesemo.com Deeper Dive Show, NFL Edition, Week 3, sponsored by No House Advantage. If you haven't done so yet, well, what are you waiting for? No House Advantage, sponsor of the Deeper Dive. You know why it's called No House Advantage? Because there's no advantage that goes to the house. It's a brand new sponsor that we've got here at Awesemo.com. And it puts a beautiful spin on the daily fantasy sports world by offering player prop contests across all of the major sports. So here's how it works. It's exclusively peer-to-peer. Like these other sites, you can play against your friends. You can play in tournaments, all of it for real cash prizes. The best part is you can join for free today. All you have to do is download the No House Advantage app and check out the daily props contest without having to deposit a dime. So you can get an idea of what it looks like, a feel for it, without actually depositing. You're playing guaranteed cash prize pools, create your own private contests. Either way, No House Advantage offers real cash prizes every single day, and you can choose the contest you want to join and select your player prop. So, for example, if you think today Derrick Henry bounces back, has a monster game, right, and he's going to run for easy 100-plus yards, put them in your 5-point spot and create your lineup all the way down. It's a really cool spin on how things are done in the industry. It's a much better way to get into player prop games. And these player props are static. They're not being adjusted throughout the week. So there are many ways to really take advantage of that and find an edge that way as well. Download the app at No House Advantage, and they will match your first deposit up to $20. All you got to do is use the promo code Awesemo. And if you refer a friend, which you should do, and take their money, you get $5 more after your first deposit. Beat your friends, not the house. Win big with player props today. No House Advantage, sponsor of the Deeper Dive. I'm Dave Loughran. With me, as always, Ben Rasa and the number 1 ranked DFS player in the world, Alex Awesemo Baker. Alex, how we doing this morning, man? Week 3 finally upon us.
Man, it's been a rough morning for me. I was at this wedding yesterday, and I was pounding all this Indian food. And not to top it up, I wasn't able to really do as much NFL research last night, so I had to wake up super early this morning. It's been a rough one, but fortunately we don't have to play football today. We just have to play fantasy football, and I'm ready to go. Ben, how you doing, man?
First person that's ever said, that I've ever heard go, man, I'm not feeling great today, was at a wedding and pounding, I'm assuming alcohol's coming in. I was pounding shots, pounding some cocktails, pounding IPAs, but no, pounding Indian food. So I guess you learn something new every day. What's up, Ben?
Nothing. I feel disheveled for different reasons. I was not at a wedding, didn't have Indian food last night, but it was a late night with MMA and college football. We got 13 of these bad boys. I feel better, though. I came into the week, Luffy. I do the show with you and Sal on Tuesday. It's a little scrambled, but I think there's some clarity forming, and I think it's perfect timing for this show because we're starting to get some news and injury reports and whatnot.
I, for one, feel pretty good. No Indian food, no drinking yesterday. I drank a little bit on Friday night, but we had on the contrary. Friday, I didn't even have to do a show yesterday, so I'm refreshed, feeling good. Ready to talk some football. We're happy to have all of you guys with us as always too. Hit that thumbs up if you haven't done so yet. If you're just coming in the door, subscribe, hit the notification bell as well so you always know when new content's dropping next. All of our sports, any sport out there, we've got shows for it. We really do have almost around-the-clock shows for DFS right here on the Awesemo.com YouTube channel. Ben, you ready to kick this off?
Let's do it.
Las Vegas Raiders, New England Patriots. The Raiders coming off a very impressive win against the Saints, the Michael Thomas-less Saints, but still the Saints. And I found myself pulling for this team lately. They're getting 6.5 points at Gillette Stadium today, 47-point total. The big news throughout the week was we had some questionable tags attached to Josh Jacobs. He is expected to play. And to Darren Waller, who basically was absent from practice almost all week with that ailing knee. He is also supposed to play. And then on the other side, well, you know what? We'll get to the Patriots after it. Let's kick it off with the Raiders here. Is touchdown dogs against the Patriots.
This is one of the many teams around the league that it's early, but they've been a pleasant surprise. They're playing good football. Carr looks to have integrated these weapons, and it's not even Ruggs, who's hurt, but it's Waller, it's Jacobs and whatnot. But this is a tough spot going to Foxborough. I know there's no fans, of course, but New England just seems to find ways to limit those top end players. And coming off the short week, I'm not overly running to target the Raiders. So as we get the slate started, there's 26 teams. The Raiders are towards the bottom for me. I'm not paying up for their stars, and I don't see a lot of value, so that really kind of cancels them out.
Do they get canceled out for you as well, Alex, or are there some Vegas Raiders players here? I still have a tough time calling them the Vegas Raiders. It really doesn't roll off the tongue well, and I feel uncomfortable every time I say it. But with Darren Waller solidifying himself as an elite tight end in this league, and then Josh Jacobs just getting an absolute ton of work last time out, do you see that transferring over into this one, or do we stay away from them for the most part against a better Patriots team?
Yeah, I think tough matchup. Henry Ruggs is out, so that kind of bolsters Waller's status as like the clear number one option in the passing offense, and the game script should be pretty favorable for the pass. So I think Waller is a good play, especially with tight end, because it's a tough position to get a really talented guy like Waller in. So I think he's solid. And then Josh Jacobs is kind of like a contrarian running back option. We got a ton of great volume options at the same price point in better matchups. So I think Josh Jacobs will be under the radar. We never really can predict how a football game goes. And if Vegas runs away with this one, I think Josh Jacobs could easily win someone $1 million.
Okay. I don't disagree. And I actually think something that we talked about on the Contrary show with Davis Maddock on Friday, normally Saturday, by the way, 2:30 p.m. Eastern time. Be sure to check that out. We bring on great guests with Alex and myself every week. But there are some good mid-priced running backs right now that are just getting significantly lower ownership, Alex. And a lot of that stems just from the fact that Miles Sanders is going to be very popular, and Kenyan Drake, also in that low 6K range, are hauling in a ton of the ownership for this slate.
Definitely. I mean, those guys are better values than Jacobs for sure. I mean, Sanders ran more than 20 times last week. He's up against Cincinnati, Drake versus Detroit. Like, those are great matchups. Josh Jacobs versus New England. That's not a great matchup. They aren't as good against the run. So I think there is potential that, and I mean, it's all about having just one guy in your lineup that's a stud, that's going under the radar in like a tough matchup, because every week those guys have slate breaking upside.
Ben, what about the New England Patriots? Right now, N'Keal Harry's getting quite a bit of ownership. I'm not particularly high on him at that ownership right now. Maybe that's a mistake, but I think it's one that I'll likely be able to live with if he's coming in just shy of 20%. His average depth of target this year is 5 yards. And while he's definitely been targeted frequently, 18 times in 2 games, tied for the lead on this Patriots team with Julian Edelman. Also, both of them have a 29% market share of targets. Really solid numbers. I'm not thrilled about his prospects today. Maybe you can convince me otherwise. How are we attacking the Patriots offense?
They're tricky. I mean, the way they're running it, it's so unique because of Cam. So I get it, but I do think it's important to keep in mind with Harry, they were trailing throughout that Seattle game, and the game devolved into a straight shootout. So that's obviously what he wants to see. I don't know if we see that in this spot. They're almost a touchdown favorite at home. So I don't mind the floor. I think he's worthy in cash, but for big time tournaments, I'm not looking to get to him. I'm not looking to fade him either. He's just kind of a play. And then you've got Cam, who, again, it's kind of an awkward build with him, just because when you're rostering him, you know you're looking for those goal line touchdowns on the ground, not necessarily him slinging it through the air. So you could run him alone. You could pair him with Harry or Edelman. I do have some Cam just because he's a serious goal line threat, as we've seen.
Okay. Alex, what about you? Patriots, any love here?
Yeah, I think Cam is one of the best plays when you factor in ownership this week. I mean, they're huge favorites against Vegas, and he's just been balling this year. 8.8 yards per attempt. I mean, I don't expect him to be that good, but he's been really effective And the main factor I'm looking at with the stack is just how cheap everyone is. We got Damir Bird. He's $3K on DraftKings, $4,500 on FanDuel. The minimum on both sites, which is ridiculous because this guy has been running routes on 94% of plays. So he's more like a 4K player at least. So he's definitely a great option. And then Harry, he's been targeted 27% of the time he's run a route, averaging 9 targets a game. It's all about the volume there. I mean, he was a first-round pick 2 years ago. And he kind of lost a lot of his rookie season due to injury. So it's not crazy to expect him to kind of have a breakout season in his second year. And I think that he's just way underpriced right now, 4,200. He really racks up those PPR points because, as you guys are saying, he's just like targeted really close to the line of scrimmage. If he gets enough targets, he'll rack up a big score.
Yeah, Damir Bird, 0 targets in week 1, 9 targets in week 2 was pretty significant. He is out there for most of the offensive snaps. $3,000, dirt cheap. I get it. What's his ownership at right now? He's coming in around 10%. Makes sense. So, Alex, we'll close this game with this last question. Do you like some ideas of stacks here? I know Davis Maddock on Friday said that he doesn't even mind running naked Cam Newton out there if necessary. Is this one where you're okay running a significant stack and then running it back with Vegas?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I mean, I think the stack's really good here. The ownership is high. Cam's projected at 15% ownership. I think they're like a top play. Someone would try to figure out ways to make that work. Another guy that's interesting is Rex Burkhead with James White out last week. He ran routes on 75% of snaps, and he's 4K. He's not like the greatest value, but I think that if you need a contrarian running back, he could be a good option, and even as a stack.
Ben, Chicago and Atlanta. Here's a game that slightly to my surprise, I thought could potentially be a little bit more popular than this. Right now, the only player in this game getting double-digit projected ownership is Allen Robinson. Now, we still have Julio Jones projected in, so that could make a big difference. Apparently, we'll probably know if he's playing right after this show ends and right around when the injury report show starts, which comes up at 11:30 Eastern and takes you up till noon, where we'll do live before lock from noon to 1. But as it stands right now, Allen Robinson is the one getting a lot of attention, but not nearly as much as I thought. I really like Allen Robinson today. The Falcons are dealing with more injuries again to their secondary. They had a bit of a COVID scare there. Ultimately, the way I see it is Mitch Trubisky probably will be able to move the football today. I like a lot of elements of this game, from Allen Robinson, who is the clear bona fide number 1 in this offense. Once you get past him, you're talking about Anthony Miller, whose snap counts have been very, very concerning. And then Darnell Mooney and Javon Williams, like it's Allen Robinson. Tariq Cohen hasn't really been getting worked in. And you know what? I'll go back to David Montgomery. He's getting no attention whatsoever. I still have some interest in him right now at 0.1% ownership. So yeah, the Bears actually a team I'm targeting today. What are you doing with this Chicago squad?
This is an interesting game. It looks like the Bears are taking money as well. Spread was 4. It's dropping in a lot of spots. I like Allen Robinson. Listen, the target should be there. We know Falcons, man. They've been in some wild games already. Seahawks and the Cowboys last week, which was just ridiculous. That defense is broken. You mentioned they've got injuries in the secondary. They had the COVID situation in the secondary. The game, for anyone, I know Chad was asking this, the game is fine as far as we know. We haven't seen anything. It's not like they're potentially canceling this game unless something breaks between now and kickoff. So don't worry about that. I'm not getting too crazy because this is the one thing. If you go to Trubisky, you're going to pair him with Allen Robinson. I'm not sure I'm comfortable finding a secondary Bear to go with.
That's the problem. That's the problem.
Yeah, so it's more like I'm more looking to put Allen Robinson in other game stacks just as a really solid piece rather than loading up on this actual game.
I think it's a great idea. Yeah. Again, I wouldn't be surprised if this is a spot where David Montgomery gets plenty of opportunity in this game as well, simply because if these teams are both able to move the football, but neither of them goes up big to start the game, they're not going to phase him out. I also have him above 13 and a half carries today. Took the over on that. I think it minus 112 or something. So I do expect him to get worked in pretty heavily again this week. What about you, Alex? What are we thinking with Chicago and Atlanta?
Yeah, I think it's a solid spot. I think that Allen Robinson really stands out as a great option. If I had to pick a second bear to stack up with Trubisky, Jimmy Graham is a good option. I mean, he had a rough few years, but in Chicago, he's the number one tight end option. He's running routes on 75% of plays, targeted 15% of the time. Not eye-popping numbers, but solid. So I think he's a good option. Although I don't necessarily think you have to stack up two players with your quarterback on every lineup. So I'll definitely have some exposure to just Robinson, Trubisky. And then Matt Ryan is always one of my favorite quarterbacks for a stack because Atlanta just throws at such a high rate. I have them at about 64% throwing, which is about 6% higher than the league average, I think. So I think the volume is there if Chicago can stay in the game. Julio and Ridley are very expensive, so it's hard to really fit them in. So this is really a pay up to be contrarian spot.
Okay. What are your thoughts on the Falcons before we move on, Ben? One, do you anticipate Julio Jones playing? I really don't know. He's done this stuff a lot. I'm assuming right now that he doesn't play, which would free things up for Russell Gage, who's actually been heavily involved through the first 2 weeks, surprising many with 21 targets through the first 2 weeks of the season. First off, do you expect Julio to play or no?
No, I don't.
Okay. So let's operate under the assumption that he doesn't play. What are you doing with the Falcons? Because that really changes things, taking a monster elite top 3 in the league, top 5 in the league wide receiver out of the offense.
So the thing that's kind of weird, and I don't want to say I'm overthinking it, but obviously when a top end receiver sits, your first thought is, wow, these secondary options are going to pick up a ton of targets. But Russell Gage, as you just mentioned, already has the target. So really it's more about how much ownership is he going to gain / certainly the Bears will up the priority on stopping Ridley and stopping Gage to an extent. So it's really a trade-off of how much more target share do these guys gain versus the bump in ownership and the bump in just the Bears defense. I'm not sure Julio sitting actually helps Ridley or Gage. I think it helps Gurley and it helps Hurst because those are secondary options that I think could get more involved in the passing game rather than Ridley and Gage, who are going to be busy regardless.
Okay. Does that mean you don't like Ridley and Gage, or it just doesn't help them?
No, I think that the bump in ownership presents an interesting game to go underweight on when Julio sits. Clearly they're going to get opportunities, but I don't think this is like a plug and play for Ridley by any stretch.
Okay. Yeah, I wouldn't say it's a plug and play either. As a matter of fact, there are so many good receivers on this slate that this would be a good opportunity to get away from him. Not completely, but yeah, I don't see this being an absolute necessity to get to Ridley. I will say this much though. 9% ownership on someone that's been this good through the first 2 weeks. An absolute monster. 4 touchdowns, 200 plus yard games, double-digit targets in each. I thought he'd already be commanding more ownership than he is, but he's not. So yeah, if Julio's out, it'll certainly make a difference. Okay, let's talk about Cincinnati and Philadelphia. This is an ugly one for sure, Alex, because, well, you have no idea what you're going to get out of Carson Wentz. Very simply put, you don't. But we know that Miles Sanders is garnering a ton of ownership right now. Earlier in the week, he was getting more ownership than anyone on the slate. Now he's second most at 35.6% behind only DeAndre Hopkins. So he is the highest projected running back. And now you've got the Philadelphia Eagles, who in some spots opened at 6.5. They're down to 4.5 point favorites, 46.5 point total. Does Carson Wentz bounce back here? And well, let's start with Miles Sanders first, get this one out of the way, and then we can start talking about the passing game.
Cincinnati's defense has just been really bad. And then in the draft, they spent a lot on offensive players too. So I'm expecting this year they're going to continue to be bad. And we see that with Philadelphia having a 26 team total, which is pretty high. So I think pretty much everyone on the Eagles is in play. Sanders being a great option. I mean, he ran more than 20 times last week. He's at the mid-range in a game script that probably will favor running. So I think Sanders is probably the top play of the slate or one of the top ones. But I think a contrarian approach could be stacking up Wentz. I like Desean Jackson. He's always a really efficient guy. And with Jalen Reagor out of the lineup today, maybe the rotation tightens up a little bit and everyone sees some more snaps. And then Ertz and Goddard are a bit expensive for their average production this year, but solid options too.
All right, Ben, talk to me about the Philadelphia Eagles. I told you before the show that Carson Wentz prop, or his interception prop, very surprising to me. The over 0.5 interceptions was plus 108. So, and you can check all of this out at oddshopper.awesemo.com. It's a killer site. It is completely free, and all of these books are throwing money away right now to get people to sign up. So you have some insane offers like $500 free bets, insane deposit bonuses, like legitimately nuts. And then some of the bets you'll get once you sign up on these sites, it'd be like if the Eagles score one touchdown, like say you live in Philadelphia or Pennsylvania, if the Eagles score one touchdown, bet 10 to win 100. So just really insane stuff. You've seen it all, Ben, was shopping across these books, but you can type a player's name in and find all of their props. Way simpler than searching through some of these books and all the props. You can put your bet tracker in. You can track your bets. You can get alerts on watch list for when odds shift the way you want or against you. You can shop from 7-8 different books to see which line, which odds are the best. So much stuff. Oddshopper.awesemo.com. Definitely check it out. But yeah, Ben, he is the under on one interception is favored. I was a little bit surprised by that.
Yeah, because you have him relegated to the CFL. Like, he's going to be fine. Everybody chill out with the Eagles. I like them a lot today. Of course, Sanders is a great play in all formats. I think he's, I don't want to say a lock for cash, but you really should strongly consider him there. I certainly have exposure to Wentz and Desean Jackson. The tight ends are tough to distinguish, but you can target them. Listen, they're 0-2. They have to win this game at home. I think they do win this game at home. The only thing that I like for Cincinnati is that they get the long week. They're coming off the Thursday game, but this defense is just overmatched. They also, and we'll get to these guys in a second, Cincinnati has some pretty easy run back options if you do stack up the Eagles. So I think it makes sense. It's a contrarian stack and one of my favorite actually on the week.
All right, so Carson Wentz to you is perfectly fine.
Yes.
You're not worried that he has been this brutal.
No.
Who are your favorite stacking options with him? Zach Ertz, Dallas Goedert, Desean Jackson?
Desean Jackson. I think it just sets up for – this is already an aggressive stack, so I'm trying to maximize the ceiling. I know the floor is really bad. The Eagles could crumble. Wentz could be awful again. Desean Jackson has that ceiling, has that upside, and with all the injuries on the outside – we know what he can do on just a handful of targets. So that's probably my favorite guy to pair up with Wentz.
Okay. And I will say this again. I love Miles Sanders today. There's no reason not to. But we do have a stable of these mid to high 6K players at running back that are getting virtually no ownership and are also 20-plus touch capable guys, right? Like players that could easily come out of games with 25 touches from Nick Chubb to Austin Eckler. And again, in cash, Ben, you said it, it's pretty much a lock spot for Miles Sanders. Even in tournaments, I will have plenty. There's no way I'm fully getting away from him. I'll probably still be over the field. But I do want to point out that it is siphoning off ownership from some other good backs. Even someone like James Conner. I'm not saying I love the guy today, but 6,700. Clearly, Mike Tomlin threw him back into the fire as the bell cow, assuming he stays healthy. Chris Carson against Dallas. The list goes on. All I'm saying is there are a lot of players in that range that are going largely overlooked. Anyway, Alex, on the other side, AJ Green, he's the air yards king. He's just done nothing with him. Leads the league in air yards, leads the league in deep attempts north of 20-plus yard attempts. He has 8 of them, 0 catches. 0 apparently have been catchable, according to Pro Football Focus. I believe I saw one that should have been caught, but that's besides the point. He's coming into this game maybe with an opportunity to turn things around. Joe Burrow's clearly been targeting him. Tyler Boyd had a great bounce back spot, but Burrow threw 60-plus times last week. What are we doing with the Bengals against Philly as 4.5-point dogs?
Well, the thing about AJ Green that's really concerning to me is he's only run routes on 67% of snaps so far, which is very low for a guy that's expensive. He's $6K on DraftKings, $5,900 on FanDuel, a lot cheaper on FanDuel for their salary structure. So I think if I played him, it'd be on FanDuel. But Tyler Boyd actually stands out as the top option on the Bengals for me. I mean, he doesn't get the air yards, but he's more of a possession receiver. He's out there a lot more. He hasn't been targeted a ton this year, but I expect that to change. And I mean, I don't love Cincinnati because they've been really, really bad. Joe Burrow has averaged less than 6 yards per attempt. As you said, like they've had to throw it like a million times. So that's always good, but I'll probably lay off here because I know there's a lot of hype with the AJ Green air yards. Ben, what are you making now with AJ Green?
Yeah, I still think the ceiling is there, and although some of those things are concerning, he's getting the targets, and that for me that's the priority. Like if they are falling behind, if he's going to see double-digit targets, they may not be efficient. Lofty, you've brought up on the show a ton last year, Odell. He had a ton of deep balls, and they were all uncatchable. So what are those
second
targets?
most in the league, yeah.
Yeah, and it's early. It's only a couple weeks, but Burrow has given him a ton of balls that are just uncatchable, and he can't do anything with them. I still think that with this price, he's a good run back option. Mixon is another guy that I think he'll have 20 touches again. Even in a negative game script, I don't mind picking one of those Bengals if you want to load up on those game.
Okay. Neither do I. The Philadelphia defense hasn't shown enough to me yet to assume that they're just going to shut opposing teams down either. They haven't been able to make stops, right? Like Jared Goff completed his first 13 passes last week. The Washington football team in the second half ran all over them. So until Philly can slow teams down, I'm going to work under the assumption that Joe Burrow will be able to move the football. Not particularly high on Mixon. I still have respect for this Philly run defense, but yeah, I think they're going to be able to operate seemingly decently well in the passing game. And look, if AJ Green and Burrow couldn't connect last time out, and he still targeted him 13 games, and he still targeted him heavy late in the game, and he's got 22 looks on the season so far. You know, there's still, like you said, Ben, there's still a ceiling there for me, and that's what matters. With a 24% target share, which is by far the highest on the team. No one else is above 14%. So
Sorry, Lafayette. Real quick, I wanted to ask both of you, what are you doing with Sample? He is someone that has started to infiltrate my lines. He stepped up with Uzoma out for the year. Are you getting to any of him, or do you think that's kind of chasing a little bit? 9 targets last week.
You can go ahead, Alex. I don't mind him at all, actually. He ran a ton of routes last game after Uzoma went down.
Yeah, I mean, I think a decent option for sure. He was running routes on 50% of plays last week. As you guys mentioned, we should expect that to go up because Uzoma played the first half of the game. So I think the only thing that's really driving me off of Sample is that he's 3,500 on DraftKings and 4,800 on FanDuel. So he's not like the greatest value this week. So I think he's a decent play, but not really cracking my lineups.
Okay. Let's move it on then. San Francisco, New York Giants. Hit that thumbs up if you're just walking in. Of course, you can always rewind and get started over again. We're on the 4th game here as we get through a 13-game slate. San Francisco, New York Giants. All right, Ben, both teams ravaged by injuries, right? You've got Bosa out for San Francisco, Raheem Mostert, Tevin Coleman is out, George Kittle remains out, Saquon Barkley's out for the year, Sterling Shepard hit the IR. Both teams absolutely battered by injuries early in the season. This game has a 43-point total, and the Niners are laying 3.5 points on the road. There isn't a ton I like here. I think there might be a day where Devontae Freeman actually becomes pretty viable. I don't think he would have signed here if he didn't think he had a clear path to get a lot of opportunities, but this might not be the week for that. Ultimately, with Nick Mullins and Jimmy Garoppolo out and Nick Mullins starting at quarterback, this could be a really ugly, messy game. Maybe there's some silver lining here. Anything you like? You can, by the way, cover both sides. I don't think we need to spend a bunch on each side.
Yeah, this is a game. It's riddled with injuries. And although I would normally say like, wow, this opens it up, it really doesn't. Like the Niners running backs, you're still going to have a stable of guys back there. There's going to be new guys. Jeff Wilson's going to get involved. They have a creative player behind McKinnon as well. So that's going to be crowded. The one guy, and I say this every show, I still think that Evan Ingram will have some games. He's going to be involved. 8 targets last week. Yes, they're going to miss Saquon, but Evan Ingram is a matchup problem, and the Niners pass rush is certainly going to be mitigated to some extent. I don't mind going to him at minuscule ownership at flat 5K, but overall, this is an ugly game with two teams that are really hurting.
How about you, Alex?
Yeah, I mean, this one's it's not the most exciting game for fantasy, but I will throw out some love to the Giants defense. Nick Mullins' ball security has been really bad in the NFL. He's throwing interceptions more than 3% of the time. So I think the Giants defense are a really good value this week. And then it's a little bit of guesswork trying to figure out what's going to happen with Raheem Mostert and Tevin Coleman out. So I'm kind of like looking at Jeff Wilson as a good value option because I just feel like Jerick McKinnon has like a really long injury history. And he's not really a workhorse build to begin with. So I feel like Jeff Wilson could just run the ball a ton of times, and he's only 4K on DraftKings. So on a week, it's probably not like a great week to go value at running back, but he is a good value.
Okay. I really don't want to spend too much time on games that we're not fond of, that don't have really a ton of value. So for both of you guys, either one wants to jump in. Doesn't matter. Is there anything else on this game that stands out?
I'll throw out that we got Sterling Shepard out, so that is a little bit of a bump for Golden Tate and Slayton and Ingram.
Ben?
No, this is just one. I really think that with the injuries, it more muddies the water than opens up value.
All right, so I feel somewhat similarly for this next game, but more so just on one side of it, Pittsburgh and Houston, right? So you have the Houston Texans coming into this game with an 0-2 start on the year. I think we have to look at this to some extent that they just ran into back-to-back buzzsaws, right? Opening up the season against the Kansas City Chiefs and then following it up with the Baltimore Ravens. Right. So I'm willing to absolve them of some of the mess that they've made through the first 2 weeks of the year, but it also hasn't been pretty. And you've now got Deshaun Watson, who's thrown for 380 passing yards, or I'm sorry, that's wrong. Deshaun Watson, who's thrown for, he's already been picked off twice, I'm sorry, and is averaging 264 yards per game, which is fine in these tough matchups. I get it, but he has as many touchdowns as interceptions. And coming into a spot like this, the thing for me, Ben, is do I think Watson might be a little bit overrated? Yeah, I do. That's a story for another time, right? But I really liked Will Fuller and Brandon Cook coming into the season. Two very fast outside receivers that can make some noise. David Johnson in week 1 actually looked good, right? Just super quick burst. He was cutting on a dime, change of motion, change of direction was way better than it was in previous years. But Pittsburgh defense, man, that's a juggernaut defensively. They are very scary. And I just don't know how much more success Watson's going to have this week than he did in the previous 2. Changed my mind.
Can't really change your mind. I will say that overall, I think people naturally, when you see a team 0-2, there's an overreaction, but digging in, I don't know what people expect for them to do. Go on the road to open the season and beat them in Arrowhead and then follow it up with that Ravens game. They should be 0-2. This is an important game.
Like I said, I'm willing to overlook some of that, really tough spots.
This is a tough spot too, though. They're going on the road with the Steelers. I do like the Texans in this game. I bet them 4-point dogs. Problem is, I don't think it's a great fantasy game, and Deshaun Watson is going to have some ceiling. He's going to have some mistakes, and in certain, like everyone, he's missing Hopkins, but this is a good Steelers team. We saw what they did to the Giants. We've seen them. They're going to cause problems week after week for teams. So as much as I would love to say Will Fuller is like a mega mind genius, deep GPP play, he always has that upside, but he is straight live for 0. And I don't know if it's really worth it to go there. And I'm not getting to Watson. So honestly, it's just a pass, even though I think the Texans hang in this game.
What about you, Alex? Looking towards the Houston side of this, if you want to make that transition to Pittsburgh, you're free to do so.
Yeah, I like David Johnson a lot here. He's a legitimate workhorse back with Duke Johnson out. And the matchup is tough versus Pittsburgh. Houston's only projected to score 21 points. But DJ he's a really cheap option and going to be pretty low on given the matchup. As far as pass catchers, I think Brandon Cooks stands out on his new team. He has been kind of like the number one receiver, and he's been targeted 21% of the time. He's been running routes. Will Fuller has been targeted 16%. So I think Brandon Cooks is somewhat interesting after week 1, where he only played 46% snaps due to injury. He played 90% last week. So I think Cooks could go under the radar here.
The Pittsburgh Steelers, on the other hand, have a veteran quarterback in Ben Roethlisberger who has, to be fair, held his own since coming back from this injury with that elbow surgery. I don't think anyone anticipated him coming back all that sharp, but 300-yard passing game against the quality Denver pass defense last week. He has been strong, 5 touchdowns to 1 pick through his first 2 games. And I've been pretty impressed with him. Ben, I think what impresses me the most is the immediate connection that he has with Deontay Johnson. They have been very, very impressive together. Granted, the yardage totals haven't been insane, but you're looking at someone in Deontay Johnson who has been targeted on, and ready for this, compared to Juju Smith-Schuster. Deontay Johnson has a 33% market share of targets for this Pittsburgh offense. Juju Smith-Schuster's below 20%. Now, that isn't to say that Juju's not going to have some big games. And I think that you're going to see this Houston team allow some pretty sizable performances to slot receivers this year. But Deontay Johnson has been the go-to guy here. That's a monster target share he's got.
That's something I really am interested to see, because I did not see that before the season. I thought that Juju was really live to have a monster bounce back year. And it's not to say that he can't, but right now, as you mentioned, Johnson is getting a ton of work. He's going to be popular this week. I think he's cash viable. I still like Juju a little bit, though. I don't think the ownership is not going to be there nearly as much as it was because of the emergence and the 23 targets for Johnson. But this is a team that can get it going. They're at home. And again, it's not my favorite game to target. I'm not getting to Big Ben just because he's a 0 in rushing. And on 13 games, I think that does make your window a little more narrow. So maybe some Juju. Certainly, Deontay Johnson is not going to kill you, in my opinion. I may use him for cash. But I don't have a ton to say on the Steelers side.
Do you have anything else to add with the Pittsburgh Steelers, Alex, from Deontay Johnson to Juju to James Conner?
I think Deontay Johnson and Juju are a little bit expensive this week, but I agree with what you guys are saying about the target share with Deontay Johnson being really encouraging. So I think that he's worth taking shots on. But I think the hype might be a little bit high given the recency bias there. James Conner is really the guy I'm interested in here. He was named the workhorse before the season started, got kind of banged up week 1. Benny Snell played a lot week 1 due to injury, but then week 2, Conner ran the ball 17 times. Benny Snell only ran the ball 3 times. So I feel like James Conner might not get as much attention due to that fact that he didn't play that much in week 1. And I think he's a good pivot away from higher ownership options.
All right, let's keep it going to Tennessee and Minnesota. We're through 5, still got a ways to go here, but just shy of an hour. Tennessee and Minnesota. Ben, you mentioned prior to going live on today's Deeper Dive that you have a lot riding on this Minnesota Vikings team today, more so from a betting standpoint. Maybe that translates to DFS. Right now, the Tennessee Titans are laying 3 points in Minnesota. 49.5 point total, though. In some spots, this opened at 45.5. So the total continues to rise. And the Titans are field goal favorites against the 0-2 Minnesota Vikings, whose defense has been an absolute train wreck and should only expect to get worse now that they've actually added more injuries going into week 3.
Yeah, I mean, I saw that their secondary is banged up, but honestly, my first thought was how much worse. Maybe that helps them because they need to find bodies.
I thought the exact same thing. You can't, replacement level players were already out there at some positions. So what's the difference?
Yeah, what's the difference? I also said if the Vikings lose this game, I'm not coming on the show next week. Vikings are winning this game at home.
Losing Anthony Barr, I do think is a pretty big deal. Only because you're talking about like a monster linebacker that is one of the heartbeats for this defense. But that's really it.
Listen, the Vikings defense is not the same, and they're struggling and they need to get it together. But what I like is on the offensive side, and this is where we get into the DFS side. I write a premium article. You should come check it out every week behind the paywall. Dalvin Cook is probably my favorite play on this slate. I think he is in a perfect spot, not getting a ton of love, partially because they're 0-2. He's gotten like 15 touches in the first 2 games, pretty middling totals, still found the end zone 3 times. If they win this game, and I do think they will, I think he pumps that up north of 20, and we're going to see the Dalvin Cook of last year. And this is a guy that if he was 7,600 last year, we would have been talking about, is he 50% owned on a slate? He's going against a Titans team that got gashed by the Jaguars in week 2. They were absolutely steamrolled on the ground. They won the game, but it's not about that. I really don't think this run defense can stop Cook. So if the Vikings are able to hang in this game and he gets a positive game script, 7,600, a huge buy spot for me.
I think it's a great call. You're right. They have taken a beating on the ground, and even against Denver, they coughed up 107 yards on the ground with Melvin Gordon turning in a decent performance late in that game once Phillip Lindsay went down. That is a cheap price. It's also a cheap price on Derrick Henry, coming back in the opposite direction, Alex. Henry's $7,800 on DraftKings. Now, his last game was underwhelming, but he has now carried the ball 66 times in 2 games. 66 times in 2 games. I'm sorry, 56. But he's averaging almost 30 carries a game. That's not something you can say for most running backs in this league.
For sure. I mean, Derrick Henry is a great option every week, but particularly this one versus Minnesota. Their defense has just really been pretty bad this year, and there is Darrington Evans coming back this week. All right, he's making his debut, so I'm waiting to see how that plays out. I'm not anticipating that'll change Henry's role, but it could, I suppose. But the main factor here is AJ Brown is out. That just makes their receiving core really, really weak. And I just feel like the Titans are going to run the ball even more than they normally would. So that's really the flow chart saying Henry's the play.
Okay. Yeah, I like him as well. It's only a matter of time before he has a monster performance. But Ben, I'm with you on Dalvin Cook. That's a cheap price point. I know some people are probably asking, what about Alexander Madison? Is Madison someone that we need to worry about being worked into the offense more? He did have 10 looks, 6 attempts, and 4 targets in week 1 in a game that they lost by 9 points. I would lean on the side of no, but what about Adam Thielen?
I mean, Thielen, obviously without Diggs, he's their top end target, and he's going to get the looks, but I'm really structuring this game on a different script for the Vikings. Okay. Like Thielen should thrive in the Green Bay game, and he did, obviously, got in the end zone twice. I think the Vikings win this game, and if they do, Dalvin Cook over Thielen every day of the week in positive game scraps.
Fair enough. Thielen is 4th in the league in market share this year, so the passing volume has been low, and Kirk Cousins has completed more passes to his opponents than his own teammates. But I will deviate from you just a little bit there and saying when they do pass the ball, a third of his passes are going to Adam Thielen. So lower passing volume, the script might work against them, but when they do pass, I expect Adam Thielen to soak up a large amount of those opportunities against the Tennessee pass defense. That's okay. I think they have some holes. Alex, close this game out on both sides. Anything else we're missing that we haven't talked about yet? By the way, A.J. Brown has been ruled out, but we knew that was the case coming into this.
I agree with Ben that Dalvin Cook's really appealing. I mean, Minnesota has just not run a lot of plays this year. They haven't been able to sustain drives. And I mean, I think that's more fluky than anything. Tennessee's defense is pretty average. So I expect Dalvin Cook to have a bounce back week here. I mean, he's a high volume guy and where he's going to get a lot of touches, and that has a lot of value on a slate where a lot of the running back ownership is being concentrated among a few guys.
Okay. So if we look at this next one, Washington and Cleveland, on the surface, it's a pretty ugly game, Alex, but you know what? To be fair, it's going to be a pretty ugly game regardless. But there might be a little bit to talk about here. The Cleveland Browns are 7.5-point favorites. They have a 26.25 implied total, which is one of the higher marks on this slate. 45 total on this game with Washington at 18.75. But starting with Cleveland, Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt last week against the Cincinnati Bengals on Thursday Night Football. Nick Chubb had 22 carries. Kareem Hunt had 10. They had 32 combined carries. And I anticipate a similar game script here where Nick Chubb gets off to an early start. Maybe he's not mega efficient, but I would anticipate the Washington offense sputtering again. Now, if you want to talk about McLaurin, if you want to talk about Logan Thomas, I'm on board with that. I like Logan Thomas a lot more this week than I did last week. I'll talk about that in a moment. But ultimately, Nick Chubb is sub 7K and is currently at 0.2% projected ownership in a game where he could legitimately see 25 carries. Am I wrong to think there might be some value there?
No, I think there's a lot of value there. And I think as far as like a median projection, Nick Chubb doesn't really stand out because he's the same price as guys like Sanders.
Right.
And he has a much bigger timeshare than some other guys. So I think that he's a guy that could break a slate at low ownership that maybe will go really under the radar this week. So I think as a contrarian play, Nick Chubb really works.
What about you, Ben?
Yeah, I mean,
you can talk about Cleveland in general.
Yeah, Cleveland, they're a touchdown favorite at home. And you have to think that, there's a lot of weapons. There's no doubt that the touchdown variance is a thing, but you have to think Chubb is first in line in a game that they should win. So he's shown the ceiling. He torched the Bengals on Thursday. The Browns need games like this. This shouldn't be close. They should be running the ball late in the game. So low ownership on a guy like Nick Chubb is always appealing, especially when you look at this matchup. This is not a daunting matchup. It's not the easiest in the world, but it's not like he has a terrible spot either.
How about Odell Beckham going up I don't know what to make of this spot because Pro Football Focus, and I said this a few times today, but much to my surprise, Pro Football Focus has the Washington pass coverage and defense top 4 this year, and their run defense is like top 10, or top 11. It's so hard for me to fully buy into that. I respect that D line, that front 7. I respect the pass rush a lot, but it sure seemed like Arizona did anything they wanted in the first half, took their foot off the gas in the second. But more than anything, I know some of these players that are in the secondary for Washington. I can't say I'm particularly worried about this defense. Maybe you can shed a little bit of light on how we approach guys like Odell Beckham, Jarvis Landry, Austin Hooper today.
Well, it's tough. I think in particular is the one that's most interesting, and it's a product of the slate itself. When you look at where he falls price-wise, he's right next to the Seattle guys and Amari Cooper. He's also right next to Allen Robinson. all of those guys are interesting. And I think the public and me too, them. So he kind of gets lost in the shuffle, and that alone makes him interesting because this is a guy that we know is electric. I do worry though that he just doesn't get the targets in a game that could get out of hand.
Okay. That is a concern of mine as well. Even last game, Odell Beckham got off early start. Huge weight off my shoulders, as you know, Ben. I'd say both of us, really, just anticipating this team being decent, and they haven't been great yet. But only 6 targets. Once again, wasn't totally necessary. I'm not sure it'll be necessary today. What about when you flip it over to the Washington side of the game, Alex? You have Terry McLaurin, who's been spectacular, particularly last game against Arizona, made some huge plays, gets open at will, and now he's got a spot against this Cleveland team that has been carved up by opposing aerial attacks. And I think you could see more opportunity for McLaurin to have a solid game today. I'm not getting to a ton of him right now just because the position is so deep, but Logan Thomas is also only $3,700 on DraftKings.
Yeah, both of those guys are decent options. They stand out more as far as like yardage than touchdown equity because Washington is only projected to score 19 points this game. So that doesn't make me love them, but these guys definitely have a lot of upside. Antonio Gibson as well. It's just like the pricing on DraftKings seems to be pretty high on all these guys. So I'd be more likely to play them on FanDuel where they're a bit cheaper.
Okay. One advantage to playing these guys, and you're right about the touchdown equity, but they don't have a legitimate running back that they can use to operate, efficiently down towards the goal line. So maybe if they do manage to get down there, more attempts are going to be looked at for a Logan Thomas or Terry McLaurin out a little bit further, but can make some serious noise as an outside receiver. Okay. Do you want to move on to the next one, guys?
Yeah.
Yep. All right. Hey, by the way, everything that you listen to on YouTube right here on the Awesemo channel is available on our podcast network. So check that out. And while you're at it, follow us at Awesemo DFS. That's Alex, at JazzRaz DFS. That's double Z, single Z, DFS. And myself, Laffy_D, LOUGHY_D. Twitter is a very good spot to get information for football, for basketball, and so many other things. Don't get me wrong. It's a cesspool of misery and despair and condescension. But, we're there, and why not join us? All right, so let's talk about Buffalo and the Rams. Alex, this is a game that I've talked many times about. I do think should be some intrigue here. It is going largely overlooked in DFS circles. I haven't seen a ton of interest in it. I do believe throughout the week it has become a little bit more popular and reasonably so. But there are just some really interesting spots here. Devin Singletary with Zach Moss out is getting all of the ownership. But Stephon Diggs has been a killer through 2 weeks. John Brown, 20% market share targets, but still a deep guy, outside threat that I like Stephon Diggs this week, but if Jalen Ramsey is shadowing him, you might very easily see John Brown with a monster game here. And I actually think the shootout potential. Josh Allen has gone for 300 plus and then 400 plus yards in back-to-back games. Never had a 300-yard game before this season began. And then on the opposite side, you've got solid options like Cooper Kupp, Tyler Higbee that are all going widely ignored. Highest ownership right now, and I'll toss this over to you, is 5% outside of Devin Singletary in this entire game. The highest owned player is 5%.
Yeah, I think that Josh Allen has been, and the Bills offense has been the surprise of the season because in previous years, his efficiency has been pretty poor, averaging less than 7 yards per attempt. But this year he's over 9, partially because they did play Miami last week and the Jets in week 1. But he's really shown that he's got a lot of upside in this new passing attack that features Stephon Diggs. So I think that they are a good pick to be contrarian spot this week. The Rams, it's a little bit tougher to get to them because they're all pretty expensive. And the matchup is tough versus Buffalo. But I think they could be good contrarian plays as well with Kupp and Woods being reasonably priced in decent spots, but I'm not super excited about them.
Some comments in chat, Ben, that Josh Allen has been playing shitty teams, which isn't something I'm going to argue. But what the biggest point here that can't go overlooked is that while Josh Allen has been playing these teams, he hasn't even needed to take a heavy aerial attack, but he has. And they've kept their foot on the gas despite having sizable leads over both the New York Jets and the Miami Dolphins. So they philosophically, there is a different approach here that they're not leaning on the ground as much as they have before. And we have to pay attention to that, even if you don't like this game.
No doubt. And listen, I'm a huge Josh Allen guy. He's going to make some head-scratching plays. And even through these first two games, he's been unbelievable. He's still made a bunch of questionable throws out there. He's gotten away with a bunch of them. But the upside is undeniable. And Diggs is a game changer for this offense. It not just him, it opens up the rest of it. Singletary makes a lot. Moss was taking a ton, and now he's not there. He should get the work. I don't love the matchup, though. I'll be honest. I think the Rams present some challenges for him, certainly that he didn't see through the first two games. So will I have some exposure to the Bills? I will, but it's not a game I'm really running to get to. I think I'm less interested in it than you are, Lafe.
Okay. For me, it just comes down to the fact that that completely ignored this game. There's like nothing there at all. Devin Singletary is the one player that is getting a ton of ownership. And look, you and I are both Singletary truthers, but let's not pretend that McDermott is champing at the bit to get Devin Singletary more touches. Like, that just hasn't been the case. So I wouldn't be surprised if Devin Singletary has like 13 touches today and everyone's shaking their head saying, what in the hell happened? Well, we have pretty good confirmation that McDermott will use other players. And I wouldn't be surprised if they continue to pass today. So is it my favorite game? Certainly not. But do I want some spots where I have, Josh Allen and John Brown run back with Cooper Kupp, or Josh Allen, Stephon Diggs back with Cooper Kupp, or maybe Higbee? Yeah, definitely. Because I think this game could turn into a much better game than it looks on its face. Alex, wrap this game up before we move to the Chargers and Panthers.
I think it's a good upside. I think I'll have a lot of stacks.
Panthers, Ben, this is actually, hey, did you know that Hunter Henry has actually, because I don't know how I missed this, but Hunter Henry has actually been targeted way more than I initially suspected because he's been very quiet. There's a 27% target share on this Chargers team this season, and Keenan Allen's at 30%. Now, granted, you have to factor in Tyrod Taylor started in week 1 and Justin Herbert started in week 2. So there is going to be a disparity that we have to draw there for sure. But even last week, Hunter Henry was targeted 8 times in week 1 as well. Keenan Allen 8 times in week 1 and 10 times in week 2. These two guys have been getting a lot of opportunities, but it also feels like a game that they could just go heavy run attack again with Austin Eckler and Joshua Kelly, both of whom already have 35 carries on the season through 2 games. That's a pretty wild number when you consider how much the Chargers have leaned on the ground to start the season. It's a weird game, man. It's a weird team.
Really weird team. And I guess that we get him back to back. I'm a big Justin Herbert guy. I do think that it's a little much, though. He comes in no expectations. The Chiefs were certainly not prepping for him, and he played well. But I do think that there's going to be some growing pains in this spot. I don't think he slides in and just dismantles Carolina. Now, it's a great spot at home against a bad team, but I don't think this automatically shifts the Chargers skill position players into a different tier. So although I like some of them, it's a tough team to decipher because there's multiple running backs, as we've talked about with Kelly and Eckler, and there's a lot of targets to go around. So I'll have bits and pieces, but I'm not getting to a Chargers stack today.
Okay. Alex, any Chargers stacks, any pieces here you like?
Yeah, I think Austin Eckler is pretty interesting. And I think he hasn't really gotten it going with the receptions yet, but maybe the quarterback shape can help a little bit. Although Herbert does run the ball a decent amount as well. Sailor. But I think one of my favorite bets this week is the under on Josh Kelly yards. I saw a 50 prop on different books. I feel like they just want to give Eckler 20 touches a week and limit his workload because he's a smaller back. And he got exactly 20 last week. They just ran the ball a million times, like you were saying. So I think Josh Kelly is being overrated by the community. This is a little bit of a hot take because I'm making this assumption that Eckler is clearly the preferred option when maybe it's not. But I think the stack it looks okay. You got Mike Williams, this good deep threat. Keenan Allen, he's been getting targeted a good amount, so I could see taking some shots. I'm actually more interested in the Carolina side, though.
Well, let's talk about it.
Yeah, I think McCaffrey being out, that opens up a lot of opportunity for the rest of the team. So DJ Moore really stands out as someone who could benefit with more targets. Robbie Anderson has been doing really well. He'd be my sell high candidate, I guess. And then Curtis Samuel, he saw a good amount of rushing attempts last game. So that kind of indicates that his role is going to be expanded with McCaffrey out. And I think he's a good play.
Ben, how about the Carolina Panthers side for you? No Christian McCaffrey. Mike Davis comes into that game, inserted into the offense, picks up 8 targets, hauls in all 8 of those targets for 74 yards. But I don't know how much faith I can put in a guy like this to operate, to function in the run game. We haven't seen him really on any team that he's been in. What was it, Seattle, then Chicago, now Carolina, be someone that is getting a lot of opportunities on the ground. I don't know. It's a strange game, but I guess there could be some interest in guys like DJ Moore and Robbie Anderson. And as Alex just discussed, maybe there's more interest, or maybe there should be more intrigue in this game than there currently is. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of split the difference. I'm not running to attack the Chargers defense. They are a little banged up, but I still think this is a good unit. That doesn't mean that some of these Panthers guys can't get it done, and particularly DJ Moore. He's going to get a ton of work, and it may not be the most efficient, but if they're trailing, and I expect they will be, he's the type of guy that could get there on volume. Alex talked briefly about Curtis Samuel. I think they want to get him the ball in a variety of ways. He's that type of player. So if he can get, even 10 touches, that would be great today in a variety of ways. I'll live with that. He's that type of player. So Panthers, it's not a great spot, but it's not one where McCaffrey goes down and now you think, well, this offense is going to score no points. That's not the case. They still should be somewhat effective, even though they're a real bad team.
Indianapolis, New York Jets. Someone in chat saying, enough already. Let's get to the Sam Darnold game. That's the first time and last time you're ever going to hear anything like that. Alex, I know you actually have some interest in this game. I am pretty much off of it entirely, but maybe you can elaborate on why the Jets stand out to you a little bit. 11.5-point dogs here against the Indianapolis Colts.
Well, they have no running game and they have no passing game. So I think that the Jets are by default going to have to pass the ball more because they just don't have any other option to stay in the game. And you got Rashad Perryman out, Crowder's out. So that leaves you with really clear options. They only have 3 wide receivers that I'm aware of: Braxton Berrios, Chris Hogan, and Josh Malone. And then Chris Herndon stands out as a guy that he's probably their most reliable option. So I think my preferred options are Berrios and Herndon. They've both been targeted on 25% of routes they've run so far this year. And that's solid enough for me to take some stabs as a value option.
Ben, what do you say?
Adam Gase, man. I don't Chris Herndon should have an insane amount of targets today. There is no excuse. I'm not saying he's going to have a big game, but he should have the opportunity to have a big game because they have nobody left. Last week, he had 4 targets. That's just mind-boggling. So I will go back. He burnt a ton of people, and that's always a good time to go back. Listen, they're 11.5-point underdog. They're an awful team, but there are guys that are playable, particularly Herndon is someone that I'm definitely going to be over on.
And they have a solid 15-point implied total. So
Straight fire.
Strong, real strong. Yeah, I'm not getting there. This whole game to me is strange. Jonathan Taylor on the opposite side, Ben, is somewhat intriguing just because it appears that Frank Wright has officially cemented him into this lineup as your go-to 3-down back. 26 attempts last week, 28 touches overall. Like that's straight workhorse bell cow material. Naeem Hines, 1 reception on 1 target. So the previous game, a ton of opportunities. This game, it was all Jonathan Taylor. The Jets are huge dogs, and Jonathan Taylor just in a spot where his price is probably fair. I'd say it's a fair price. Was he immensely efficient last game? No, but the opportunities will be there. The ownership, however, is also going to be very high on Jonathan Taylor. Among all players on this slate, Jonathan Taylor is top 6 or 7 among highest owned players.
Well, I'll say this. One, every time, I'm sorry to the Colts, because every time I target them, I killed Marlon Mack, then I killed Paris Campbell. So probably T.Y. Hilton. I hope he doesn't go down because I like him. Jonathan Taylor is a fine play. I think he makes sense in cash, but I also want to point out he got the bonus by 1 yard and he found the end zone last week and he came out with 22 points. Like, yes, that looks pretty good, but at the same time, a couple of things bounce the other way and it's not nearly as effective. He needs to be over 4 yards a carry or he's not going to get there. So it's a great spot. There's no problem with it. T.Y. Hilton dropped one of the easiest touchdowns I've ever seen last week. I'm going to go back to him in a couple spots just because, again, they are thinning out. Seemingly every week the Colts lose. So it's a weird game. It's an 11.5-point spread. So do with it what you will.
T.Y. Hilton has been targeted a decent amount relative to the volume that you've seen for this Indianapolis team, meaning his target share is 20%, but nobody else on the team is above 12 or so. The problem is, Alex, and I know you're a T.Y. Hilton guy, but the problem is I don't think Phillip Rivers is going to have to much. Even if there are a couple Jets players that put up viable games, I just have such a tough time believing that they're going to be able to manufacture points with this offense. I mean, you want to talk about relegated to CFL. This is a CFL offense. Like, this is an XFL offense right now. They have nobody. And an 80-year-old Frank Gore steering the ship in the ground game. I don't know. I don't know if Phillip Rivers is going to need to throw any more than he did last week, maybe less. And he only threw 25 times in week 2.
I agree. I think that it's difficult to project a lot of passion for Indianapolis, especially the last game when they just ran the ball a ton. So I think that Jonathan Taylor is really the obvious play here. T.Y. Hilton's not bad as a contrarian mix-up play, especially if you're going to pick Herndon or Berrios. Maybe that game script would have a little bit more passing if the Jets can do something. So I think he makes some sense, but I'm not going to be over the field, or I'm not going to have a large exposure because of the game script probably being pretty bad for Hilton here. But Paris Campbell going down to injury is a big boost to Hilton potentially.
Okay. Ben, close this game out for us. Anything we've missed?
I think that if you're in survivor pools and you want the free square, you take the Colts. If you want to be dangerous, you pivot and you hope that the Jets win, even though they're not going to win.
Yeah, anyone that took the Colts in week 1.
How'd that work out? I'm not going to derail the show, but I had not seen the Jaguars up close in person. Seeing that Thursday, I'm more confused at how the Colts lost to that team.
It's funny you mentioned that. I was all over the Dolphins on Thursday, right? Bet the money line, took them obviously +3, just, over my asking yards, carry everything. I just felt very confident. I texted a buddy. I was like, they are going to smash the Jaguars. And then I started looking at other spots. And Ben, I swear, everyone consensus was on Jags. And I'm thinking, I have to be missing something, right? We all get a lot wrong. But Gardner Minshew is like, okay, DJ Shark was out. You want to lay someone, fine. But Gardner Minshew, He's not who we saw against the Dolphins, but he's not who we saw in week 1 and week 2. Am I wrong to think that this Jaguars team is still not any good, or was the outlier the Miami game?
No, that's the outlier was after the Colts lost in week 1. I was just like, wow, I must have missed something with this Jaguars team. You know, not that they're going to be great, but maybe they will be like 8-8. No, Trevor Lawrence will be in a Jaguars uniform just as we thought.
Yeah. Okay. That's a pretty succinct way of putting it.
That's all I have to say about it. Yep.
They're not drafting Trevor Lawrence.
Yes.
Exactly. 3 to go here. We'll spend some time on these next 2. We do, guys. If you've been around throughout the week, you already know this. Our Express Pass, which is $3.95 a week at awesemo.com, we have now, we thought, it might be a little bit light. Let's beef it up a bit. We've added all of our showdown content to it. So all of our NFL showdown, I'm talking about projections for the player projections. I'm talking about ownership projections, player rankings, the top plays. All of our showdown content is now included in a $3.95 per week NFL Express Pass. So everything on top of what we already had. It's a huge advantage here in a sport where with showdown, most people usually say, it's just a lottery ticket. Well, huge GPPs are always to some extent going to involve some level of luck, but there are edges to be had in showdown slates, and being able to have the showdown projections and ownership for the price of an expensive cup of coffee is awesome. So, if you are working on a budget, but you still wanted to check our content out, maybe you can't right now afford the monthly or the annual or even the all access weekly, $3.95 a week for this package. All of the showdown stuff included on top of what we already have. There's no reason to go anywhere else if you're looking for an affordable weekly package. But if you're looking for something else and you want to get involved with baseball, playoff coming up. Remember, there's 16 teams this year, so that's going to make it for a lot of big contests once we get into the postseason. NFL, MMA had some huge contests and amazing premium content last night. NASCAR, PGA, and all of the other sports. If sites run contests, we've got premium content for them. You can go to awesemo.com/join and check out everything that we have, because Alex Baker right here, the #1 ranked player in the world, built projections, built the ownership projections, built the top stack tool, which is my absolute favorite tool we have, built the lineup builder, all of that stuff, uses them himself. It's not just his name and he uses something else. No, he uses that to win real money, play real lineups with those tools. So go to awesemo.com/join, check it out. We've got everything premium for any sports you need, monthly, weekly, annual, you name it, anything that fits your budget. Go to awesemo.com/join, check it out today. And be sure to sign up in our premium Slack chat. If you do have a sub, jump into our premium Slack chat, say what's up. It's a cool community there, talking DFS, gambling, you name it, all day long. All right, 3 to go, fellas. Ben, Arizona and Detroit. Let's make this happen. Kyler Murray, Matthew Stafford. This game expected to see a lot of scoring. And I anticipate that will be the case. The Arizona Cardinals have a 30-plus implied total. This game has a 55.5 point total overall, and the Cardinals are laying 5 points at home. Go ahead and take it away here with Christian Kirk, by the way, sidelined. Kenny Golladay is active.
So I do want to say real quick, we had a couple super chats rolling while you were talking. Your buddy Steve, always friend of the show, and we do appreciate that.
Thanks,
we also
Steve.
had one from Mike Peterson, and we appreciate that. He wanted to know about defense and N'Keal Harry. I think we all think Harry's fine in some formats. For defense, I think this is a fine way to start this game. I actually have some Arizona defense. I know it's a little against the grain, but this is a spot at home. I think they can get some pressure on Stafford, and they're a 5.5 point favorite. This is a game where there's a lot of options, so let's get into it. We got Kyler Murray, of course, playing out of his mind. I didn't think he would be this good, and I know it's only 2 games, but my God, if he runs like this is a problem. The guy that I don't want to say most concerned about, but Kenyan Drake is in a fantastic spot. He's also getting a ton of work. He had 22 touches last week against almost got there, against the football team. Oh, that was real.
Would have had to sound the alarm. Cut the stream.
And if they're winning again, I think that's the workload he's going to see. So I don't need to talk about DeAndre Hopkins. He's obviously fantastic. You can go anywhere with these Cardinals if you have the money. Not looking to stack them per se, but I'm a little worried that I don't have enough Kyler because he's just been unreal good.
All right. How about you, Alex?
I think Arizona objectively is in a great spot because the Lions defense is below average. You got all the targets concentrated in Hopkins. He's just been unreal the first 2 weeks. 26% target share, 25 targets. And then Christian Kirk being out and being replaced by Trent Sherfield and Isabella, that just means more targets for Hopkins. And the ownership's really going to Murray and Hopkins. I think that pairing of players will be the most popular today of any two players. So I think my biggest stand on today's slate is just fading that combo. I think stacking up Arizona is tough to do in an effective way because there aren't any other great options to pair with Kyler Murray other than Hopkins. So like compared to a Dallas team where you got 4 decent options, I just find it really difficult to stack up this particular team. Even though they're a great play, they're not my top. They're not cracking my roster, so to speak.
Okay. Wait, Arizona isn't?
The stack. I'll probably have some Drake. I think Drake's a good play. The game script should be good. The volume has been decent, not amazing. So I think he's solid.
One approach I'm taking, Ben, is looking to the opposite side of this one with Stafford and Marvin Jones and TJ Hawkinson. And the reason being, by the way, he's expected to play. He's likely going to see shadow coverage from Patrick Peterson. I'm not too worried about that. I think Galladay's still an elite red zone target, but he did mention late in the week that he's not at 100%, which has me interested in the rest of this team. Now, I could be on an island here, but in a game with a 55.5 point total, okay, where the Lions still have a 25 plus point implied total, Marvin Jones is getting 5% ownership. TJ Hawkinson's getting 1.8% ownership. Matthew Stafford's sub 5%. So I think some ways to do this would actually be to stack the Lions, run it back with Hopkins or run it back with Kenyan Drake, and then differentiate that way where you're still getting massive exposure to a game with a huge total and a Detroit team that's very likely going to have to pass a lot, especially if Arizona does what they're projected to do.
It's pretty interesting. I definitely think we know that's the sneakier way to go. I just have trouble with a team that has so many options and they don't stand out in terms of priority. And now you add in Kenny Golladay, who could be used anywhere from a decoy or targeted the most on, of the entire team. So I get the logic there. When I look at it, there are guys at those price points, like Hawkinson. I think he's a fine play. I prefer Ingram if I'm playing a sneaky tight end at that same point. Marvin Jones, I just have trouble getting there. So I like the Lions stack more than the Lions single players, but I don't know if I get to much of either.
Fair enough. I will say, I think the reason I want to get there is because, like you're saying, it's most people are having a tough time.
Oh, no doubt.
Making that decision to get there over everyone else. Because in fairness, there aren't that many options here. Like maybe Swift gets a few targets, but it's really Jones, Golladay, and Hawkinson. And I'm not too worried about Quintez Cephas sneaking in and siphoning off a ton of opportunities. So that is the one way I will differentiate there. I think it's an interesting way to go. Alex, what are you doing with the Detroit Lions today?
I like the logic of them kind of being a good pivot from Arizona on the other side. It's just like on DraftKings, the salaries of these guys are just off the charts for some reason. Like you got TJ Hawkinson at 5,300. I think that's just way too high. Marvin Jones 5,800. That would be about the price it should be if Golladay is out. So that kind of leads me to Golladay is kind of the only one that I'm getting priced into. So I think it's an interesting play in like the large field tournament because I don't think many people will be drawn to this team just based on.
All right. So if we're talking about Dallas and Seattle, Alex, this game currently has the highest total on the slate, 56.5. Man, Seattle 30.5 implied total, 26 for the Cowboys. They're going to be supremely popular across the board. You've got at awesemo.com ownership projections. ownership for Lockett 29, Mari Cooper up above 25. The list goes on with a number of these guys, but I will say that throughout the week, it's come down a little bit from where I anticipated it being. I'm not going to give everything away, obviously, but it was higher earlier in the week for some of these players, and it appears that we've seen it come down a little bit, particularly for these secondary options for the Dallas Cowboys. How does that change your decision-making today, if at all, Alex?
Yeah, I really like the Cowboys stack today. And I think it's superior to the Arizona stack. It has three really good options to stack with Lamb, Gallup, and Cooper. Dalton Schultz being kind of another deeper option, but I don't think I'm on him. But that just increases the number of ways you can stack it up 3 times. So that makes each combination lower owned individually. So I think that is really appealing. Dallas has been really effective at throwing the ball this year. They're an underdog, which game script should suggest that they might throw a little bit more than average. And I mean, they got great individual talents in Cooper and Gallup and Lamb. So I think there's a ton of potential here.
What about you, Ben?
Yeah, I mean, it's the highest over-under for a reason. We've seen these teams get up and down. Dallas is playing extremely fast. I know they're playing catch-up, especially last week, but
that pace,
every weapon.
That pace is markedly quicker than any other team, and it's not even close. Even if you were to say they were neutral, they're still running a very fast offense.
Really fast, and I'm not sure where that goes, but right now that's what we have to break down. And Alex talked about it. You have so many weapons within, and this is he just said this, but I'm going to reiterate it. When you stack Arizona, you are using Hopkins and you're using Kyler. When you're stacking Dallas, there's a multitude of permutations. If you throw Zeke in there as well, who's still certainly live in the passing game, you can differentiate within the stack. So it's a great game. You have obvious run back options on the other side with Lockett and Metcalf. I get it. It's going to be really popular, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you just automatically fade it.
Okay. I'm actually surprised to see that guys like earlier in the week, we were getting a ton of projected ownership for Gallup. It's down quite a bit. Same with CeeDee Lamb. Those are 2 spots that you just have to be interested in. If Amari Cooper, Ben, is going to be getting significantly more attention than those guys, I get it. Michael Gallup's target share has been very underwhelming. There are many arguments that could be made. Hey, CeeDee Lamb is just going to take over, but Gallup is still a very talented guy. 1,000+ yard receiver last season. Was more consistent than Amari Cooper, had a higher target share throughout the year, played more snaps. But all in all, if this is a game where they're maybe playing from behind again, expected to score a lot of points, I'm not going to ignore Michael Gallup just because he hasn't been great through 2 weeks. So I just think there's a million different directions you can go in this game. More so with Dallas. With Seattle, Ben, how much of a justifiable pivot can you really make off of Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf? At least on for the Cowboys, you have myriad options to choose from. You can't really say that for Seattle.
No, I will say, though, if you want to leverage within the game, Chris Carson would do that. If Chris Carson, for some reason, has a monster game, it could derail. It would come directly at the expense of those guys on the Seahawks. So I get that, but I don't find myself in love. I don't want to target a guy that slid in bounds to be sneaky, and it was the 2-minute warning last week, and you almost lost them the game. I don't think I would have made the show if that would have happened, but that's neither here nor there. I think with Seattle, you just keep it pretty vanilla. You know what you're getting. Russ is playing out of his mind, and he's got 2 monster receivers on the outsides. It's a pretty simple team to break down.
Backing up just for a moment here, because chat reminded me, Alex, yesterday or 2 days ago on the Contrary show with you, Davis Maddock as a guest, and myself, he was talking about Andy Isabella. Maybe we should designate at least a second to this. Is there, and I only mention that because chat is bringing it up, and Christian Kirk is out, and Larry Fitzgerald's 100 years old. He is archaic at this point. Is there any Andy Isabella love? Because to me, it's Drake, it's Hopkins, And that's kind of it for the most part. And I feel like I'm going to have more individual pieces than stacks. But is Andy Isabella someone that we should work into our stacks if that were to be what we're looking to do?
I'm not playing Andy Isabella. And the reason why is because it requires this logical leap that he will get a large snap count with Christian Kirk out. I went back to last year's snap counts. Christian Kirk missed a bunch of games. And the guy who is getting the biggest snap counts on the team in his absence, Sherfield. Sherfield is still on the team this year. He hasn't played a lot, but I'm just too worried that Sherfield will get the work over Isabella, and neither of them are targeted a ton when they're on the field anyway. So I'm just really not looking to it because it's a little bit of a dart throw.
Man, the hot takes coming up in chat. Whew. Fitzgerald going off. Is Isabella going to feast?
I don't know about that.
Isabella's never played more than 30% of the snaps in an NFL game.
Yeah, I think that what people like there is that if he is targeted, it's going to be a super deep target. Mm-hmm. So he only needs a couple of them. I get that. But all in all, I do think there are some better ways to go. 2,400 plus people watching. Ooh. Appreciate all you guys for being with us on a Sunday morning. Nothing makes us happier than you guys deciding to spend the morning with us. And of course, hitting that thumbs up if you enjoy and appreciate the content and you want to help support us so we can do this more and keep putting free content out there. Be sure to stick around. Coming up next is the injury report. All of the injuries break momentarily. These guys, Terry and Matt Gajewski, are going to break it all down for you. And then Josh Engleman is going to take you up live before lock, up to 1 with Kyle Dvorchak. We have a couple seconds here. I'm just going to let you guys run with it. I really don't have any love for this Tampa Bay and Denver game. Ben, you go first, and then Alex, and then we'll get out of here. It's just not a game I find myself getting to.
Me neither. Listen, I love the Broncos this year. Everybody got hurt. It's as simple as that. They have no Locke. They have no Sutton. It's a team to stay away from.
How about you, Alex?
I'll throw out, we just got Julio is out, so that'll be big news. Ridley,
there you go.
Should be a good play. Tampa Bay, I'm kind of intrigued because Evans and Godwin are both really good players, but both of them being in this week makes it so they're not as appealing from a salary perspective. On Denver, KJ Hamler is someone that I might take a dart throw at because he's the minimum, and I think the playing time will be there. I mean, we don't know exactly what to expect, but I think he's worth some shots.
All right, that'll do it. Yeah, if you want to look at some Melvin Gordon, fine. Ian Rappaport yesterday tweeted that Melvin Gordon was on the IR. So I run out, grab Royce Freeman and a bunch of teams, and then he deletes it. Sneaky bastard this guy is. Doesn't even issue an apology, just deletes it. And he's like, yeah, Melvin Ingram's on. Nobody saw that, right? Didn't say that last part. So then I look like an asshole. I got to go back, dropping him again, pick up somebody else. I don't know. It was a mess. But I think there are better options than Melvin Gordon in that range. I really respect this Tampa Bay run defense, and I think it could be a tough day for both offenses. A matter of fact, I like the Broncos defense here, and I like Tampa Bay's defense. So if I'm going anywhere, defense, special teams for both sides. That'll do it for us. Follow Alex at Awesemo DFS, Ben at JazzRaz DFS, myself, Laffy _D, LOUGHY _D. And remember, you want to come join the Awesemo family. It's awesemo.com/join. Check out all the subscriptions and passes and packages that we have to offer. Thanks, you guys, for hanging out. As always, have a good day. Good luck. We'll catch you back here next Sunday on the Deeper Dive presented by No House Advantage.
Let's take that again. Apparently I was muted. Good morning, everybody. NFL injury report show from Awesemo.com. Apologies for the bumpy intro there. With me is Matt Gajewski. I am Terry McBride. We're here to run through the injuries to catch you guys up real quick on everything going on for the slate. Matt, how's the morning going for you?
Well, it's great, man. We just had huge news come in. Julio Jones, inactive. Right away, we're starting out the show with some fire.
That's a bomb right off the top. So that was the first one on my list of the big news anyway. So I'm glad we got it taken care of right out of the gate. What's the impact? What do we think is the impact to that passing game? What's going to happen with that offense from that?
It's not exactly the most interesting game environment in the context of this slate. It's just we have so many other phenomenal games. So the 47-point total, I mean, in comparison to the Dallas game, in comparison to the Arizona game, not as interesting overall. But of course, I think we'll see a bump to Ridley. We'll probably see a bump to Hayden Hurst. And Russell Gage is probably going to end up more involved than he already was. And maybe you see little doses of Olamide Zaccheaus, who was an undrafted free agent for them, but he's ran the next most routes among wide receivers.
Interesting. So it's probably, I mean, if people are looking for a go-to receiver in that offense now, we're probably talking Ridley there, though, I would think, right? And then
agreed.
Coming in through the tight end makes sense. And then another big tight end to mention here, right? We've got Darren Waller. I haven't seen anything official, but him and Jacobs were both carrying a Q tag, both expected to go, though. That was another biggie that was kind of a question mark coming in. Have you seen anything concrete or any impact on either one of those guys?
Nothing concrete, just the rumors from Shefty and Rappaport. It seems like they're going to play. It never really seemed like their injuries were too significant. They played the duration of the game last week. Of course, Waller, absolutely massive game. I think you can safely look to him maybe in your run backs against that New England team.
Yeah, definitely. I really like Waller in that run back spot. And tight end was big last week all over the board. I mean, it was a really big scoring week for the position. We could see the same from a few of these guys again. So it makes a lot of sense there. Another biggie is just kind of the injuries from last week. I mean, we just saw a Civil War battlefield of injuries coming down, and especially in that early game. So just as far as the big ones, we know McCaffrey's going to be out. Obviously, Saquon's out. Kittle's out. The entire 49ers team is out, basically. We lost A.J. Brown. The entire Jets passing game is out. Any real big spot that you want to talk about before we dive in, like anything, if the impact from the backup QBs playing or maybe the running game in Carolina before we go game by game?
I don't think there's too much impact among those players. I think you'll see a split between McKinnon and Wilson. I think some people were immediately assuming McKinnon would be the locked-in guy there. I think it'll be a split. I don't think Mullins will have too much of an impact over Garoppolo. And Mike Davis could be sneaky, but I'm still anticipating a little bit of a timeshare there.
Makes sense. So just going into dive in a little bit of game by game here, then let me just pull up what I have on the first one. I don't have our board, so I'm just going to go in the order that I've got, if that's all right. So I've got Washington, Cleveland is the first one up. Cleveland 7.5-point favorites, 45-point total in this one. Basically, we're looking at Washington. We had full practices from Steven Sims at the wide receiver spot. Morgan Moses on the offensive line was questionable. We've got Cole Holcomb as out. They've got Thomas Davis returning to add a little bit of linebacker depth, and Kendall Fuller in the defensive backfield. Anything else, anything really stick out for you for Washington?
Not really. They're not changing a ton week to week. They put Brandon Scherf on injured reserve, so that's a tough spot for their offensive line. But otherwise, we're not really missing any major skill position players.
Right, and then on the Cleveland side of things, Adrian Claiborne, defensive end, should be a full go. He was practicing all week. Limited in practice, we had Mac Wilson and Denzel Ward from the defense, and then also on the defense, Greedy Williams going to be out, Jacob Phillips, Olivier Vernon off that defensive line. They're probably getting Kevin Johnson back in the nickel corner. Anything,
one in, one out for these defensive backs for Cleveland. And Greedy's still out, so they get Kevin Johnson back, of course, but then Denzel Ward pops up with an injury, and he didn't practice on Friday, so he actually seems more of your game time decision type call. But losing Ward, he's their best corner. That's not great. Maybe you have some mild interest in some Washington pass catchers. And then Olivier Vernon, it'll just be a little tougher to, I think, rush the passer without him. They still have a very strong defensive line.
Story would probably be more if you're looking for a piece of the Washington offense, jump on one of the pass catchers then rather than the running game, I would think, right?
Agreed.
Yeah, makes sense. Moving on, next one I've got up is Las Vegas, New England. New England 6.5-point favorites, 47-point total. Vegas, we hit on Waller and Jacobs. Those were the biggies for me. The other ones we've got here, Denzel Good on the line is had a thumb injury and is sick. He was limited game time decision. Sam Young is likely out again, so those guys are kind of in flux on the offensive line. We've got Henry Ruggs in the wide receiver position is out with a leg issue. Trent Brown on the line and Nick Kwiatkowski in the linebacker core. Anything else there? Any impact from the Ruggs injury?
The Ruggs injury, I think, is big, and it's not always what Ruggs does on the field himself, but it's what he allows the offense to do. Ruggs, of course, with that deep threat ability, really makes teams defend the entire field. Without him, they also don't have Tyrell Williams. They're really losing that field stretching element, and I think it's going to be tougher on their offense overall. We know Waller will play. He's locked in, but just a little easier to defend him. One injury I want to add, they put Richie Incognito on injured reserve this week, so they're down Trent Brown, Richie Incognito, and then a couple, potentially Sam Young and Denzel Good here too. This could be a sneaky spot for a Patriots defense.
I like that. Interesting. Good call. So, all right. Very sneaky D out there for somebody to grab. So moving over to the Patriots side of things, we had Edelman, N'Keal Harry limited in practice, but shouldn't be a real issue. I think it was just a kind of a maintenance thing. Nothing overly significant. Kyle Duggar was limited and questionable. And then we've, of course, got James White out with his family tragedy. Looked like most of the volume went to Rex Burkhead last week in the passing game. Probably going to be the same issue here, I would think. So anything else with the Pats? Anything you're seeing? I know they're banged up a little bit on the O-line as well.
No, I think they'll be fine in the spot. James White isn't a huge factor to this offense. Right now, Cam Newton is just siphoning so many goal line carries away from the backs that I don't think you're really considering any of them anyway. Just Newton's such a smash play right now, and Edelman should be there. N'Keal Harry should be there. All their missed practice time is just maintenance, it seems.
Yeah, and I agree with you on the running game. It just seems like Cam is going to be the featured guy, so I'm not putting like Sony Michel into anything with groups for trying to pick off touchdowns or anything.
Agreed.
With that. It doesn't seem worth it. All right, moving on. The Rams at the Bills. Bills 2.5-point favorites. Close game, 47.5-point total. Rams, we've got Darius Williams in the defensive backfield, who's seen 46% of the snaps this year, limited and questionable. And we've got Cam Akers, running back, is out. Any other biggies that I missed for the Rams and any impact? What's the impact for the Cam Akers injury?
Yeah, I don't think you missed anything. Cam Akers, he was the nominal starter, was not the backfield leader, however. When Akers was hurt last week, Malcolm Brown was banged up in that game too, but he's going to play today. When they were both hurt, Darrell Henderson really emerged and showed something. 12 carries, finishes with 81 yards and a score. I don't know if this is going to be the Darrell Henderson show, but I think he worked his way into more opportunity. So as far as DFS and fantasy goes, it's still a timeshare between Henderson and Malcolm Brown, even with the Cam Akers injury.
Makes sense. Do you have one side of that timeshare that you like better than the other one? Say if we're looking for a pick off a touchdown, maybe?
Not really, to be honest with you. Malcolm Brown has seen the goal line work to this point, but again, Darrell Henderson's the one that actually produced one on the field. So I'd give a slight lean to Henderson, but it's nothing I want to really target for DFS.
Yeah, that was one I was struggling with all week long. So on the Bills side, we know Zach Moss is out. So what's with Moss going out just right off the top? What's the impact to Singletary? You think he's going to see actual volume, actual shares?
Oh man, I'm excited for Devin Singletary. Yeah. So they're already running a ton of plays. They're like top 5 in the NFL in plays. Devin Singletary was averaging 13 opportunities. That's targets plus carries before the Moss news. And Moss is vacating 10 opportunities himself. They didn't really show that they wanted to get TJ Yeldon involved whatsoever. So I think we are going to see a 15 to 20 touch game from Devin Singletary, assuming they're leading in this game and they're projected to do so, winning this by 1.5 points based on bookmaker odds at this point.
I like it. I'm heavy on Singletary. We've got Dawson Knox out at the tight end position. Looks like they've got Deshaun Phillips out as a linebacker. Questionable. Another Tremaine Edmonds in the linebacking core, and Teron Johnson defensive backfield. And then Matt Milano, another linebacker, is expected to play. He practiced in full. Any impact to the defense? Anything that favors the Rams offense in any of that?
I think it's the opposite. News came out from Shefty this morning that Tremaine Edmonds is expected to play. Last week, we saw Mike Gesicki really take advantage of that matchup. So maybe people were targeting a guy like Tyler Higbee as the tight end in that matchup. I'm not going to be interested with Tremaine Edmonds returning. Plus, Higbee was only running a route on 58% of Jared Goff dropbacks anyway. He's 3 touchdowns on 9 targets. Regression incoming.
Good call. Interesting. All right. I like that. That's a very, very important call. Moving over to San Fran at New York. San Fran favored by 3 over my lowly New York Giants, who will be without several of their most important players. Saquon Barkley out for the season. Any impact on any thoughts on the Giants running game? We've got Devonta Freeman signed there. We've got Wayne Gallman. We've got Deion Lewis. We've got a mixed bag of stuff that I don't really want. Any idea who's going to get the ball, what it looks like for DFS purposes? Anything there?
I think you're avoiding it for DFS. If I had to guess, I would say Deion would get the first crack just because he's been with the team. Devonta Freeman's coming over midweek, so how much time has he really gotten to learn the playbook here? I would guess it's Deion.
Makes sense. If you read the New York Post, though, Devonta's a heck of a leader, and they're really looking forward to having him on the field. I don't know what that means for his timeshare. They've got Sterling Shepard out as well, so we've got impact to Slayton, to Evan Ingram, and to Golden Tate in the passing game potentially. Any favorite out of those guys who you'd be looking for to pick up some of those targets?
Slayton's actually projecting fairly well. He has a 21% target share, and he's running around an 88% of Daniel Jones dropbacks prior to the injury. So I'm guessing he'll be the number one. He's less expensive than Evan Ingram, so maybe there's a slight edge there. But ultimately, I'm not trying to get too much of this game, just a 42.5 point total. And the Giants are still underdogs despite San Francisco missing almost their entire roster, which I'm sure we'll get to.
Yeah, we're going there right now. Nothing like being underdogs at home to the second string from the other team. But that's what we got. So, Garoppolo's out. Mostert's out. Coleman's out. Kittle's out. Nick Bosa's out on the defense. It's just, it's guys just dropping like flies. So we've got Nick Mullins taking over the quarterback role, and then we'll probably have McKinnon and Jeff Wilson in a timeshare at the running back. Feels like that's pretty much the most important part on the offensive side. What's your read as far as the running back, as far as what the quarterback might be able to do?
I'm more interested in Jeff Wilson just based on projected game script. They're projected to lead this game. Wilson's a guy they've used in the past on the goal line. They've actually fed him 20 carries in a game before, which is kind of shocking to see. But they've dealt with injuries in the past, and he's handled a sizable workload. It still will be a timeshare. I'm just not convinced they want to give McKinnon a huge workload after he essentially missed the last 2 seasons.
And still no love for the Giants offense, even though Nick Bosa's out, I assume, right?
Listen, I think you could maybe target this in like a sneaky stack situation. San Francisco is missing, on top of Bosa, Solomon Thomas, Richard Sherman, D Ford, Dre Greenlaw, and Akilla Witherspoon is questionable. He's their second corner behind Richard Sherman. So I don't know who they're trotting out there.
That's true. That does make some sense. And we do know, there's upside in that stack a little bit. We've seen Danny Jones do it a couple times with what he can do with his legs and slinging the ball around. So, all right, maybe. I know Jeff was on it earlier in the week too. So moving on, Houston at Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh 4-point favorites, 46 total. Houston looks like Duke Johnson is questionably limited in practices with an ankle. Kenny Stills was limited as well. I think just an illness on Stills' part. Do we have any updates on either of those guys?
News from Shefty, Duke Johnson is not expected to play. We'll have to wait for confirmation. But that should just lock in David Johnson to an absolutely massive role in this offense. We haven't really seen Johnson get there because they're constantly trailing in games, and they have a tough matchup here against Pittsburgh where they also project a trail. But he's projecting very well, actually.
Yeah, I like Johnson here. I know that was a guy that Alex was all over in the preseason. Been on, the
every week, man.
Yeah, it's going to be a guy. We're going to get paid her one of these weeks. Pittsburgh side of things doesn't look like there's anything significant. Juju missed some practices this week, but he's been back. He was just kind of maintenance on his knee. Anything that was under the radar there that I might have missed, or anybody on IR that wasn't on my list?
They have a couple offensive linemen on IR, but it's nothing new. They've been without Wisniewski and Banner for a little while now. They're getting David DeCastro back, it looks like, so maybe a little boost to their offensive line. I think James Conner could be sneaky here in a game where Pittsburgh projects to lead. And we didn't really see any sort of timeshare with Benny Snell last week. Benny Snell coughed the ball up, fumbled, and essentially just handed over the reins to Connor again.
Nice of him to give that back. Yeah, that's Connor's another spot that I'm on a little bit, and I don't necessarily think the public's on it to a big degree or enough anyway. So I like that call. Moving on, we've got about 10 minutes. Guys, hit the thumbs up out there and take advantage. We've taken our weekly pass and we've added the the weekly express pass, and we've added the NFL Showdown single game to it. So you're getting all the Showdown and single game player projections, ownership projections, top players tool. You get all of that for $3.95 in the express pass. Jump on that. That's the only promo I'm going to read. So hit that thumbs up for us. Moving on to, let's see, where were we? We are at the Titans and the Vikings, 50.5 total. We've got Tennessee. A.J. Brown is out. Big loss in the receiving game, potential bump to Corey Davis. We've got Chris Jackson and Derek Roberson potentially out on the defense. Malcolm Butler will be in at the corner. Any impact across that? What do you think on the passing game and impact to the defense?
Bookmakers seem to think that this game is going to score some points. But if I've learned anything, it's that bookmakers are far more accurate at these things than me. So I think you do have some interest in this game. Now, Corey Davis, 21.3% target share, looks nice on paper, except they're dropping back so few times that had amounted to just 5 targets for Davis last week. Tannehill only dropped back 27 times in a game they won and played from positive game script, which they also project to do so here. Rather than play like Davis or Jonnu Smith, who's running around on 60% of Tannehill dropbacks, that's about 17 routes. I mean, I'd rather just look to Derrick Henry, who we know is going to touch the ball 25 to 30 times in a game.
Makes sense. Yeah, just ride that volume and ride the guy who's going to be pounding the ball. Absolutely. On the Minnesota side, Cam Dantzler out, Mike Hughes out, Troy Dye out, Chris Boyd. Looks like they've got some issues in the secondary. So I know we were just saying, maybe not on that Titans passing game, but anything there that maybe intrigues you a little bit about taking a look at them and, maybe throwing a few shares at them.
Yeah, if you want to play the matchup game, I mean, Minnesota already lost 4 starters in their secondary coming into the year. Now they're down Dantzler and Mike Hughes. Those are 2 starters for this team. So you tell me who they're playing. It's going to be rough. They also have Danielle Hunter on injured reserve. They just put Anthony Barr on injured reserve. This defense is absolutely brutal.
Makes sense. Moving along, we think we need to speed up a little bit. So Cincy at Philly, 47.5 total. Cincy, Geno Atkins out on the defensive line. Mike Daniels questionable, didn't practice. Bump to Miles Sanders may be coming back the other way against that defensive line.
Yeah, he's going to carry immense ownership, but for a good reason. 27 opportunities, that's rushes plus targets in his first game back. He's a smash play.
Yeah, love that spot for sure. On the Philly side, Jalen Reagor out, Alshon out again, practiced but isn't going to play. Fletcher Cox likely coming back. Desean Jackson had maintenance day but should be fine. Anything else on the Philly side? Any impact in the passing game with Reagor missing?
I don't think so. They're already running 12 personnel at such a high rate, and Reagor was a part-time player after his preseason injury, so I think it's going to be a lot of Goddard, a lot of Ertz.
Makes sense. Jumping over to Chicago, Atlanta, 47-point total. Chicago, Khalil Mack limited in practice with a knee. We have Mario Edwards on the D-line, full practice, likely to go. And all the wide receivers were on the injury report, but everybody's healthy and should be going as far as I can tell. Any impact in Chicago?
No, it's all good there. Mack's just maintenance right now.
Makes sense. Atlanta on that side of things, Ricardo Allen out in the defensive backfield. A.J. Terrell with COVID-19, NFL's first COVID case. He's going to be out. Kendall Sheffield also out in the defensive backfield. We hit on Julio. He's going to be out. Big impact in the passing game there. Anything else important on the Atlanta side?
No, you hit it. They're down 3 starters in their secondary. That's going to be good if you want to get a little risky today and play some Trubisky. And we already hit on the Julio news, and maybe you give a bump to Ridley, Hurst, and probably Gage.
Makes sense. Yeah, roll those dice with Trubisky. Yikes. Jets at Colts, and Colts favored by 9.5. Low total. Jets lowest implied total of the week. They're without Crowder. They're without Perriman. They're without their entire passing game, really. Any love for anything on the Jets? I know Berrios was questionable coming in. Do we have any news on whether or not he's going to go?
I think he's going to go, but still keep your eye on this one. We need to see prior to game time. I guess you could look to Chris Hogan if Berrios sits, but ultimately not a spot I'm really trying to get to. Herndon's only running around on 59% of dropbacks for Darnold, which is not good despite them having no pass catchers.
Yeah, nothing too exciting about that pass game for sure. Indy, we've got Paris Campbell is out. He went on IR with a knee. A couple banged up guys in the defensive backfield. Looks like Rocky Sin is going to miss, and then Matthew Adams on the in the linebacking core. Then we've got Jack Doyle coming back at tight end, most likely, but probably going to be limited. He is going to be a timeshare with Mo Alley Cox. How do you see that working out? Do you think Doyle's going to be full go, or is he going to be limited?
No, but one thing I thought about is maybe Indianapolis potentially using more 12 personnel, something they did last year when they had the injury it was to T.Y. Hilton last year, this year's to Paris Campbell. So keep that in the back of your mind. I wouldn't target it this week with Doyle being limited, but maybe Indy starts moving that direction without Campbell for the foreseeable future.
Makes sense. Jumping over to Carolina at Los Angeles. Chargers favored by 6.5, 43.5 total. We've got obviously big one. McCaffrey is going to be out. Mike Davis picking up the carries there. Saw a lot of targets last week. Picked up the role, obviously not filling those shoes, but picked up the role fairly well. Russell Okung back on questionable rather on the O-line. So any impact on the line with Okung and with Mike Davis, his ability to run the ball in there?
He only handled 1 carry last week, but he saw 8 targets. It was everything that I wanted McCaffrey to be before he got hurt. So I don't know if it's a 1-for-1 role. Maybe Curtis Samuel, who played a lot of running back in college, steps up for a few carries here and there, but it should be mostly Davis.
Sounds good. Charger side of things, Tyrod out with an accidentally punctured lung, which was one of the weirder injuries we'll ever see. So got their big rookie quarterback stepping up there. Any love for Justin Herbert on that side of things? And then anything else from the injuries? Looks like some banged up guys on the defense for the most part. And those are really the key injuries there.
Yeah, I think you can look to Justin Herbert instead of Tyrod Taylor. The Chargers are actually running a lot of plays. They're 4th in the NFL in plays right now. Very, very run heavy with Tyrod under center. Herbert showed some surprising efficiency, small sample size here, so take it with a grain of salt. 67% completion percentage, 9.4 yards per attempt, and he's a big guy. He has a little bit of rushing chops here too. There's interest in him, I'd say.
Sounds good. 5 minutes left, 3 games to go. Guys, hit that thumbs up out there for us. We're going to fly through these last 3 for you. Lions at the Cardinals. Big target game for everybody, I think. Cards favored by 5.5, 56-point total. Detroit, Desmond Trufant out in the defensive backfield is a biggie. Kenny Galladay coming back is a biggie, but he told us flat out he is not 100%. What do we think the impact is there? Those are the 2 big injuries on the Detroit side for my money.
Galladay is going to be hard to play. He's in the late slate of games too, which also limits your options. So if he comes out and warms up and then, doesn't play or plays a decoy role or something, you're really going to be upset with yourself. At the same time, I don't know what other receiver has as much upside in the offense. As far as the defense, they don't have Trufant, and Coleman's already on injured reserve. So this is a secondary we're trying to target actively.
Yeah, makes sense. I think we're going to have a lot of the Arizona side of this, and I like that Detroit passing game as well, so I'm going to have some of that too. We've got on Arizona's side, Christian Kirk is out. You bump Larry Fitz with that, or do you prefer the Andy Isabella side of that?
I would prefer Larry Fitzgerald, but it's not by much. Larry Fitzgerald's a very limited player at this point in his career. We just haven't seen it with Andy Isabella. He's running the 4th most routes on the team, but that's only 28 routes through 2 games, which is essentially nothing. So maybe they replace him by committee. Maybe they don't. Hard to say at this point. I think Fitz is your locked-in guy. Andy Isabella is going to offer you more of that untapped upside.
Sounds good. Anything looked like a couple guys banged up on the defense, just questionables and mostly going to go. Any impact in the defense that you saw?
I don't think it'll be huge. I saw Drake Kirkpatrick, but he was limited in practice. Jordan Phillips as well. I think it'll be fine.
Sounds good. Jumping over to another biggie, Dallas at Seattle. 5-point favorites for Seattle, 56.5 total. Another big one. A little impact on the offensive line for Dallas. Tyron Smith has got a neck issue. Looks like Brandon Knight fills in if he's out. Got DeMarcus Lawrence questionable on the defensive line. Any impact for Dallas there?
Their offensive line is really banged up. Tyron Smith questionable. Lyle Collins injured reserve. Cam Irving injured reserve. Now Seattle, luckily for Dallas, Seattle is one of the worst teams at generating pressure, so I think it will be fine. There's also a ton of injuries to other places of this defense. Anthony Brown's on injured reserve. Chidobe Awuzie is out for this game. This is going to be a smash by Seattle's passing attack if they continue to pass at higher rates than we're used to.
Yeah, fire on all cylinders with that team for me, that's for sure. On that Seattle side, we've got Quentin Dunbar expected to return in the defensive backfields. Any other significant ones? Rasheem Grant, defensive end, put on IR. He's going to be out. Anything significant for Seattle that you're seeing?
They put Bruce Irvin on injured reserve, and he was their only pass rusher with a pulse. So it's not looking great for this Seattle defensive line.
Okay, so does that give a little bump to the Dallas passing game then? A little bit less pressure on them coming in, and maybe Dak has a little bit more time to throw the ball around?
Yeah, if you need more reason to consider Dallas pass catchers on top of them being just extremely efficient, yeah, I think it's a great spot for the Dallas receivers.
Sounds good. Last game, hit that like button, guys. Tampa Bay, 6-point favorites at Denver, going into altitude, 42.5-point total. Tampa's getting Chris Godwin back from his concussion. Scotty Miller fully healthy, had some issues in practice with a hip. Justin Watson goes out, though, from the receiving corps. So 2 good receivers in, Watson out. Any issues with the passing game there? Anything significant on the injury side for Tampa?
No, most importantly, Godwin's back from the concussion. So it'll be Godwin and Evans that you really want to look to.
Yep, makes sense. Broncos, we know Drew Lock's going to be out. Jeff Driscoll's picking up the QB role there. Cortland Sutton is going to be out. Philip Lindsay was doubtful last I saw, continued impact in the backfield there. And then Jerry Jeudy, a rib issue, and was questionable last I saw. So what's the impact of the passing game there with a backup QB and a couple wide receivers banged up or missing?
There's going to be some cheap guys on, like DraftKings and FanDuel getting targets, but they're also receiving those targets from Jeff Driscoll in a moderate to difficult matchup against Tampa Bay. I don't think you want to go here.
Makes sense. Yeah, that's kind of a stay away spot for me for sure. So I think we got through all the games this time. I think we might have left one out last time around by accident, but this week we got them all. So give us another thumbs up out there, guys. And that should be it for the injury show. I think we've got live before lock coming up. So thanks a lot, Jordan, on the other side of the glass for producing. Matt, killer job as always on the analysis. And we'll see you guys later.
You hit the button a little early and my giant middle finger to Jordan behind the virtual glass shows up on the stream, but I don't know if it will or not. Welcome to NFL Live Before Lock. Almost said NBA because I only say this once a week. Excited to dive into week 3. I am Josh Engleman. I am joined by Greg Ehrenberg. We are brought to you by No House Advantage. And before we do anything, I need to let you guys know I got my week 2 100 yards and a touchdown pick correct. Ask me anything. Greg, what's that?
Do I get half credit for Ron? I mean, I had Amari Cooper. He got to the 100 yards, didn't score the touchdown, though. Dak Prescott just ruining Cowboys' stacks last week by rushing the ball. He finished with 3 rushing touchdowns from the 1-yard line. There were so many opportunities to throw to one of his receivers and just didn't do it. But yeah, hopefully nobody gets hurt this week.
I mean, it can't be any worse than last week, right?
Yeah, that was really annoying, mostly because the games were so unfun for me to watch because my 3 highest owned wide receivers all got injured in the first half. It was, for me last week, Rashad Perriman, Devontae Adams, who left the game and then came back and then left again, and Paris Campbell. So all of them got hurt in the first half. And it's like, well, I'm kind of screwed for the rest of the day. And it was just kind of hoping for some min cash, but then also just kind of rooting against lineups to be like, hey, everybody's hurt in this lineup. It might as well suck as much as possible. So, yeah, hopefully no injuries because that's one thing that always impacts football and is impossible to predict.
Yeah, I had Dak as my most exposed quarterback. That was just terrible, considering I had 40% Julio Jones, and he laid a gigantic egg. Can't get it all right, though. Not important. Let's dive into this right now. Please, I haven't gotten a chance to do this yet today. Hit the thumbs up button. We're at 485 likes, so Greg and I are going to be the people to take it over 500. That makes me like super happy. So there's 1,800 and change of you in here. Hit the thumbs up. Means a ton. Subscribe to the channel, notification bell. We have so much content right now. You don't want to miss it. That is your best bet. Let's start at the quarterback position. And I am starting here because I have a lot of this person. I'm going to give you a prop from No House Advantage. You let me know if you like either side of this. How do you feel about Cam Newton today? 233.5 passing yards, 1.5 passing TDs. Do either of those props stand out to you? And what do you think about Cam Newton?
Yeah, I like Cam Newton as a fantasy option a lot, particularly as a little bit of a pivot off of Kyler Murray and Russell Wilson are both going to get a ton of ownership today. I think it makes sense. I like both of them. I have exposure to them. But I'm not sure that Cam Newton shouldn't be right up there in terms of projected ownership with them, because we look at what Cam Newton's done the first couple weeks of the season, and he looks as good as he's ever looked. And Bill Belichick suggested to him being the quarterback of the Patriots. They're running a totally different offense they did with Tom Brady. Newton's running the ball a ton, and I think it really helps that he's finally healthy, obviously. But I kind of think that year off last year with the foot injury might have been a little bit of a blessing in disguise, because he had so many injuries going back to a couple of years ago. He had not only the foot, but he also had the shoulder he was dealing with. And even when he was healthy last year before the foot injury, it didn't look like the shoulder was fully healthy. And now he's throwing the ball well, he's running the ball well. And I kind of think that the year off really helped him, because I don't know if he ever would have been able to get back to this level had he grinded out all of last year.
Yeah, I think the shoulder injury in particular, I mean, he looked like he couldn't throw. That is not the case through 2 weeks. So I am quite high on Cam Newton today. I like hearing that you are not at least out. that would have been a bit of a bummer.
No. I like Cam Newton a lot.
I don't know how to touch on Kyler right now. He's projected for massive ownership. It feels a bit too high, although he's been fantastic. What are you doing with someone that's picking up so much ownership at the quarterback position?
Yeah, I mean, he's one of my highest owned quarterbacks. The issue is just the way that I set up my lineups compared to the field. I'm just never going to get to that number with a quarterback. There's never going to be a point where I'm 30% owned to be overweight on a quarterback like Kyler Murray. I will say this, if you play cash games, I think Kyler Murray is the guy to go to in cash. He's one of my 3 highest owned quarterbacks this week. It's just that I'm not where the field is because it's just such a ridiculous number. But Kyler Murray is a great play.
He's actually, I don't have any. I agree that he's a great play. I agree that he would be immediately in for cash. In a GPP, I'm going a different direction, and we're going to get to running back in a little bit. On my dummy crunches earlier, I'm running my actual crunches now. Had to switch to the 2-computer setup just to make sure that I can get all of this stuff happening at the same time. Didn't want to bog down anything, switching screens. Anyway, not important. In lieu of playing Murray, I'm playing a lot of Kenyan Drake. I assume that goes hand in hand. If I'm not playing Murray and he doesn't do well, my assumption is that Kenyan Drake is probably the biggest benefactor if Arizona is playing well. Fingers crossed at the very least. One other quarterback with props that I wanted to touch on before we got to those running backs, Matt Ryan, 389.5 passing yard prop. Do you like the over or the under on that bad boy?
Did you say 385.5?
Yeah, that feels like a typo, right?
I like that's the number you said. I was like, that can't be the number. If that's the number, then under 385.5, especially with Julio Jones.
It's got to be 289, and I typed that incorrectly, right?
Yeah, I would think so, because I mean, if that's actually the case, if there are books that are offering a prop of 385 passing yards for Matt Ryan, it's like, I'm going to leave the show and just put all of the money I have on the under there, because that kind of feels like
289.5.
Yeah, I was gonna say a prudent use of my time from a financial standpoint would really be to just bet all the money I have on an under 389.5.
Here's what happened. His prop last week was over 300 yards. I changed the second 2 digits, not the lead digit.
I think that's a more reasonable number. I'll put it that way. But still, we look at him still in the offense. No Julio Jones this week. I wish we would have had more information on the hamstring injury a week ago, where it turns out that Julio is just playing it severely compromised. I mean, he got hurt 2 weeks ago, and he's not playing this week, but he was able to play last week. So, he clearly wasn't at 100% last week. But without Julio Jones there, I still think they're going to throw the ball a lot because that's how the Falcons run their offense. But I'm more inclined to go with an under on Matt Ryan without Julio there.
Same, not really looking much at Ryan. So let's just sum up quarterbacks right now. Who is standing out to you? You mentioned Kyler a little bit earlier. Favorite quarterbacks for the slate?
Yeah, I mean, we talked about before. I always kind of spread a little bit at quarterback, but I mean, the guys at the top are obvious. I think everybody's going to roster Russell Wilson. Everybody's going to roster Kyler Murray. No issue with either of those guys. Dak Prescott, I think, also has to be considered a really strong play this week. I'm kind of surprised he isn't garnering a little bit more ownership, especially considering how much we've seen the Seahawks throw the ball. It goes both ways, right? Not only do we expect a ton of output from Russell Wilson, Dak Prescott and the Cowboys are going to throw a ton to keep up. We even saw Mike McCarthy say as much during the week that they're not going to run the ball to try to slow down the clock. They're going to try to keep up with Seattle. That's why the total is so massive for this game. I think both quarterbacks are in really good spots and they shoot out. Josh Allen, I think, as a contrarian quarterback at only 2% owned, he's off to a ridiculous start to the year for fantasy purposes. We always know he has the rushing upside. He's throwing the ball like 40 times a game to open the season. So Josh Allen, I think he's a boomer bust option, but given the ownership of the quarterbacks on the high end, absolutely nobody is rostering Josh Allen this week. I mean, he's 1 to 2% projected ownership right now. So I think him as a contrarian play is the guy who I'm highest on relative to the field.
I have a different contrarian play. I have 5 quarterbacks going today. Okay. I mentioned Cam Newton. You mentioned Dak. I do have Dak. And Russell Wilson. I do have Russell Wilson. 2 guys a little bit further off the board.
Can I guess?
Ryan You go. Well, I already kind of gave up one of them right there.
All right, one of Ryan Tannehill, correct?
Yes.
All right.
Yes, you got it.
Is the other one Daniel Jones?
It is not Daniel Jones.
Okay.
You got the right division.
So Carson Wentz then?
Carson Wentz.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think that makes sense. So with Carson Wentz, who are you willing to stack with Miles Sanders? Because I think he's going to get a bunch of work in the passing game also.
So it won't happen on purpose, but it doesn't. My groups won't stop Miles Sanders for showing up. So I'll have a few lineups that ultimately do have some sort of Wentz plus a pass catcher or two. And then Miles Sanders can just show up in that lineup as well. So I don't get the sense that I would have a ton of it, but I would assume, given the amount of Wentz that I think that I'm going to have, there will be probably 5 to 10 lineups that have Miles Sanders in it as well. Just a guess off the top of my head. But those are my 5 quarterbacks for today. The Tannehill piece scares me a bit, but he's just a different guy now in Tennessee. I just need it to continue, at least for this week. I don't care what he does after that.
Just be good. Just be good this 1 week.
Yeah, that's all I need. I don't care what his performance looks like at any other point other than today specifically. Let's transition over to the running back side. I've got a prop for you. Our friend Ben Rasa on the show that started at 10, the deeper dive portion. Big fan of Dalvin Cook today. Props are 79.5 rushing yards. I'm glad I didn't accidentally put a 1 there. 3.5 receptions. What do you think about Dalvin Cook in today's slate?
Yeah, so this is a really interesting slate for running backs because usually all the guys who are the chalk at the high end, Derrick Henry, Ezekiel Elliott, they're not getting ownership this week. And it kind of makes sense because there's a million cheap running backs. Not a million, but there's a bunch of cheap running backs that I like this week. So this is a slate where we're seeing a lot of lineups that are kind of mid-range to cheaper running backs. Some of the expensive wide receivers, DeAndre Hopkins in particular, with Julio Jones not there. So I think that it makes a lot of sense to make some contrarian builds where you throw in Ezekiel Elliott, you throw in Dalvin Cook, because that's just going to be a totally different build than what everybody else is on. It's not to say that I have a ton of Dalvin Cook, but I have more than the field. And I think that that's a good way to mix up lineups a little bit. I'm a lot more spread thin than I typically am for a football slate this week. There's so many plays that I like.
Yeah, it's there's a lot in that like mid-ish tier clear across the board. We got to bump to another running back though, and this is the chalk play of the day per our ownership. Miles Sanders currently projected at 36% ownership on DraftKings right now. Correct number? Too high? Too low? What do you feel like about Miles Sanders for today?
It feels about right to me. I mean, it was really hard for me to get away from Miles Sanders. I'm overweight to the field on him just because I think he's such a good per dollar play. I've talked about this before, but if you look at Miles Sanders and where he was going in yearly leagues, right? He was a late first, early second round pick. He was going he was going in the same spot as guys, around the same areas, kind of like Derrick Henry and Dalvin Cook. And these guys are so much more expensive than him. And the other thing too is that it's a good matchup for Miles Sanders. He's going up against the Bengals. They don't have a good defense. So, I mean, you just you're coming into the season, and if you drafted Miles Sanders in the first round, right, in your yearly league, and now you're looking at his price on DraftKings compared to some of these other guys, just from that mindset, I don't see how you don't just smash him into a ton of lineups. It's hard to really see him failing at this price point in this matchup.
Yeah, I thought that there was an Eagles running back this year that would have a hard time failing in a matchup, and that went by the wayside in week 1. But I agree with you. I think he's pretty clearly the best running back option relative to salary this week. We've got Devin Singletary as a $4,900 pay down option. Is that a spot you're looking to go to save some salary today?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that he makes a lot of sense. The one concern I have with Devin Singletary, there's always been this weird situation where no matter how good things look for Devin Singletary, the Bills find a way to not give him as many touches and snaps as he should, whether it's been Frank Gore in the past. There was times last week where they just gave Isaiah McKenzie a bunch of snaps out of the backfield. There's always some goofy way that they find to not give Devin Singletary as many snaps, as many touches as I would like him to get. On paper, I think that he's an absolutely terrific play this week. I really like him. The price on DraftKings is ridiculously low. He's a better play on DraftKings than FanDuel this week. The only hesitancy I have with putting Devin Singletary in like 70 or 80% of my lineups is there just going to be some just goofy type thing that happens where is there some guy who gets a bunch of snaps that I don't see happening? Like we know Zach Moss is out this week. That's why Devin Singletary is in such a good spot and the ownership is so high. I love him. The only thing I can nitpick is that we've just seen the Bills find ways to not give him touches in the past.
He scares me so much. I just don't trust the Bills. I just don't trust his role. Like when push comes to shove, do those rushing touchdowns just end up in Josh Allen's hands? I mean, that plays well into what you mentioned before for Allen. That's one of the scariest spots. The good news is 4,900 doesn't mean you're totally dead in the water. It might stop you from fully winning a contest, but you can handle a less than efficient game at 4,900 more so than you can handle it if, say, DeAndre Hopkins, I know different position obviously, but DeAndre Hopkins at 30% ownership goes awry at 7,900. What running backs stand out most to you? Where are you concentrating your personal exposure at this point?
Yeah, so I mean, outside of Miles Sanders, who's my highest owned running back on the slate, and overall highest owned player on the slate, I think there's some cheaper running backs that are not getting as much attention as they should. Jerick McKinnon and Mike Davis, who are both cheap running backs. One thing that I do think makes a little bit of an impact is, remember in previous years, the min salary for running backs was $3,000. And we would see these guys in previous years where if there was a situation, Jerick McKinnon, no Tevin Coleman, no Raheem Mostert, that McKinnon would just be $3,000 bare minimum, smash play, be over 50% owned in tournaments. But there's a couple of things that's different on DraftKings. Number one, they raised the min salary on running backs from $3,000 to $4,000. And then number two, they've really aggressively priced up some of these backups in case this type of injury situation happens. So there isn't quite as much of an obvious per dollar value on Jerick McKinnon. But even so, I think he has a ridiculous upside against the Giants this week. And the ownership is pretty low given where the running back ownership being concentrated on guys like Miles Sanders, Devin Singletary, Kenyan Drake this week. McKinnon's looked really good when he's touched the ball this year. We haven't seen it all that much because he was the third running back on the roster coming into the year. But he has 6 carries for 100 yards. So it's a small sample size, obviously. But, I mean, clearly explosiveness is still there despite all the injuries. I don't think they're going to be giving him, like, 20 touches or anything like that. But at his price point, I don't think he needs it, particularly against the Giants.
I have 14% McKinnon as of right now, so I'm more than happy with that. We have him projected for 10.5. 4,900 looks good. Here's the question. Who's the better $4,900 running back, Devin Singletary or Jerick McKinnon?
It's Devin Singletary, except just because of the difference in ownership. I still think that Jerick McKinnon makes for a really good pivot play. Not that McKinnon has no ownership, but I think his ownership should be higher than what it is. But yeah, I think both are really good plays.
Okay. I have a bit more Singletary than I do have McKinnon, but they are both two of my top, 7 or 8 running backs. So I'm more than okay with it. Is there anybody that we need to touch on at running back that's like we haven't really talked about. Any thoughts on Kenyan Drake? We've got Zeke at only 15% ownership, Chris Carson at 11% ownership, Derrick Henry at 10% ownership. It feels like a really scary day at running back because the real high end isn't getting all that much love.
Yeah, that's something that I was saying before is I think one of the easiest ways to differentiate yourself in a lineup build without going just totally crazy off the wall is you play Dalvin Cook, you play Ezekiel Elliott, just because everybody's going to be saving money at running back and paying up at wide receiver. So I think that is one way that you could pretty reasonably differentiate yourself. I don't have a ridiculous amount of ownership to those guys, but I do have some, and it just puts me on some different lineup constructions. You talked about Kenyan Drake. One thing I think is really weird about this slate, Kyler Murray's projected to be the highest owned quarterback. Hopkins is projected to be the highest owned wide receiver, which makes sense. Kenyan Drake is projected to be the second highest owned running back. So what are lineup constructions going to look like on this slate? Is everybody just jamming in all of the Cardinals guys together? And it's not to say that Drake and Murray can't play well together, but I don't know. That just feels like a suboptimal GPP build to me. I think for cash games, absolutely play all three of them together. And I have some full game stacks in tournaments where I played them all together. But the ownership is a little weird to me that people are that exposed to the passing and rushing games of the Cardinals.
It's mind-boggling to me. That's so much ownership. Drake is the third most owned guy on the slate. Hopkins is second. Murray is sixth. He's the highest quarterback. DeAndre Hopkins is the highest wide receiver. Only Miles Sanders is ahead of Kenyan Drake. I don't really understand what the lineup construction is going to look like. I'm really excited. Lofty and Adam and I do sort of a recap show. We'll have that tomorrow at 11 a.m. Eastern, I believe. I'm really anxious to see what the construction of those lineups look like. How much of it is just Murray and Hopkins? How many of them include Drake? How many of these lineups are just solo Drake and he just looks like that good of a play, or he's just that kind of an optimizer play? It's going to be really fun to look at that information tomorrow, in hindsight at least.
Yeah, and I mean, I think all three of them are really strong plays. It's just the ownership with all of them together is a little weird to me.
Very. I don't totally get it. Anything else you want to touch on from running backs?
Yeah, so I mentioned Mike Davis's name, but didn't really talk about him yet. I mean, if we look at how the Panthers ran their offense last week after Christian McCaffrey got hurt, I mean, we can't say that Mike Davis played the Christian McCaffrey role, except he got 8 targets in the passing game. They just kept checking the ball down to Mike Davis. So I look at his low ownership on DraftKings and his price point. I mean, I don't think the Panthers are going to be competitive or win very many games without McCaffrey in there. I think it stands to reason that there's going to be a perfect game script for Mike Davis to just potentially get up to double-digit targets out of the backfield. I think they're going to dump down to him a ton in the passing game. I think that he's somebody who's going overlooked at running back.
That makes me a little bit nervous. I have 2%.
He's somebody who I manually went in and bumped up. I'm just going to bring up real quick exactly this. I'm pretty sure he got 8 targets last week.
Do you like him more or less than McKinnon? McKinnon $200 more or $200 less expensive. Sorry.
Right, so I have by the way, it was last week Mike Davis 8 catches for 74 yards on 8 targets. So it's not even that I look at the Panthers and be like, oh, they're going to crush this week or their offense is going to look good. I think it's the opposite. I think they're going to look terrible. But I also think because of that, they're just going to keep dumping the ball down to Mike Davis, and I think he's going to be a monster for PPR points on DraftKings. So I have less exposure to him than I have to McKinnon. I have less exposure to him than I have to Singletary. However, relative to ownership, he's coming in so low that I'm well over the field on him.
I might have to give him a little bumpy bump. I don't like he grades out very well. My problem really is just I have a lot of exposure going to David Johnson right now, only $300 more expensive. So he's kind of just getting trapped in that area where I prefer McKinnon. I prefer David Johnson. He's sitting there in the middle of the salary tier. Doesn't really get me anywhere. But yeah, I mean, it's not that I don't think he grades out well. He just happens to be that hair behind 2 guys that bookend him.
That's one of the issues I have building lineups too. And that's what I said before, why I'm spread so much thinner than I normally am. Like I look at these guys like, well, I want exposure to Mike Davis. I want exposure to Jerick McKinnon. I want exposure to Devin Singletary. And it just ends up that I have, a bunch of guys that I have like 15, 20% exposure to, and I'm a little more concentrated than that normally. But there's no way that I could look at these guys and be like, well, I want to invest in a lot of these players. And that's just kind of how it ended up, where my exposure is really spread.
Anything else at running back?
No, I think we touched on pretty much everybody. I have one question for you. I know you said that, at least in the Slack chat before, that you're pretty high on Josh Jacobs. Is that still the case?
It is still the case. I'm going to pull it up right now. I just want to make sure that I'm giving everybody the correct information. I have 28% Josh Jacobs. He is my third most exposed running back as of right now. When I ran my sims, he showed up in the optimal lineup 14% of the time. He's only projected for 6% ownership. When I get a situation where I can get that much leverage where I think they should be compared to the public, they just naturally fly to the top of my list. So that's another reason I'm getting a lot of David Johnson. Comparable odds of finishing in the optimal lineup, single digit ownership, mid-single digit ownership. Those are the two guys taking the biggest jump forward. Melvin Gordon as well at 2% ownership, a guy that I'm getting a little bit of love for. But Jacobs and David Johnson in particular, a lot of love. David Johnson bit me pretty bad. He's out on the field constantly. He's played like 98% of the snaps or something. For some reason, he's just not involved. He's like the PJ Tucker of football. Like he's there, but you don't really know it.
Well, so, I mean, what the biggest issue has been is that the Texans' offensive line is terrible and the offense hasn't been particularly good. That's really what's been the limiting factor for Duke Johnson, is that they aren't scoring points. But yeah, I mean, he looks good visually. He looked good in week 1, right? He scored the first touchdown of the season. I don't hate David Johnson this week. I have some exposure to him, but like very little. I have a couple of lineups with David Johnson. I'm going to be a lot lower on him than you are. And same with Josh Jacobs. It was just a situation where these guys, I don't disagree with you that they're good plays. There's just other guys I preferred as per dollar plays and just didn't quite get to them.
That's fair. Guys, go check out No House Advantage. They are the sponsor of this show. They've got a $4,500 Sunday kickoff special, 2K to first. That is 46% full. Less than halfway there, $15 to get in. If you go to No House Advantage, use the promo code Awesemo, you can get a $20 free play on deposit. You could refer a friend, get another $5 on their first deposit. This is the spot to do it. 2K up top and close to half full. It's going to be the best spot that you can get into. It's the best contest you'll find. That is a monstrous amount of overlay. You want to be there. And all you have to do is pick player props. We touched on some quarterback and running back props. We're going to touch on wide receiver and tight end in a little bit. You pick a prop. You pick whether you think it's going to go over or under, and then you rank that prop. Your favorite prop's going to get 6 points. Your second favorite gets 5. Your third favorite gets 4. Down the line, if your prop wins, you get those points. I highly recommend checking it out, not just because they're our sponsor, but because I think that you have an opportunity to build your bankroll based on overlay right now. You're also going to find softer competition. Not as many people going to be having the clean strategy you need for a prop contest at this point. So you, I believe, have an edge as well. Go check out No House Advantage right now. Again, the promo code is Awesemo. And if you're looking for any free content from us today, you're in luck. NFL projections, free today. I know you guys are here listening to this show. It's an NFL show. I'm assuming you would like free projections. Lucky for you, you can get them on the website. Go to awesemo.com or check chat. I assume someone will drop them in shortly. And if you're playing baseball today, I think there's baseball. I have no idea, honestly. It's NFL Sunday. There aren't other sports. MLB rankings are free today. Whether or not there's baseball or not, we have free rankings. That's really all that matters. And 548 likes. So we crested that 500 number. Time to beg again. Let's get to 600. Hit that thumbs up. 2,100 people in here, maybe 2,200, something in that neighborhood. I'm seeing 2 different numbers on my screen. Do we want to start on wide receivers right now, or is it time to do 100 yards and a touchdown?
Let's do 100 yards and a touchdown, because I have a running back pick. You're so hot with your 100 yards and a touchdown. You want to get that out there.
I do, kind of. I do. What do you remember what the salary threshold was that we set last week?
We said anything under 7,000.
Okay. Well, the floor is yours if you want it, or would you prefer me to go first?
we'll save you for last because you hit yours last week. I missed mine by touchdown last week. I would like to take half credit for mine, but I understand that's not how the game works. I'm just competitive and trying to get points. I had Amari Cooper last week. You had Jonathan Taylor. Jonathan Taylor absolutely smashed last week. I'm going to go with Miles Sanders. I understand that he's a chalk play this week, but he's so involved in both the running game and the passing game that I think he should be able to get over 100 total yards this week. The other thing, too, is I just don't see the Bengals having good defense. I don't know how they slow them down, and I think the Eagles are going to be able to score. It's been a rough start to the season for the Eagles, but I think they get back on track this week. I think they get a win, and I think that Miles Sanders plays a huge part in it.
Well, I was going to take Miles Sanders to watch chat burn down for me taking a guy that's 30% owned. So I'm going to have to go a different direction. Part of me wants to take Devin Singletary, but that is just a terrifying potential pick. So I have two options. I'm going to put them both out into the ether right now. We'll see where we end up. Option number one is Kenyan Drake. I feel like I like that a lot, but I'm going to go with the guy that I actually have the most of. You should know him well. 6,500 this week. I'm going with Amari Cooper.
Hey, I went with him last week. And I mean, look, if you look at that game script, right, there's going to be a ton of points scored. I think that there's going to be 100-yard receivers in this game. There's going to be a ton of touchdowns scored. I don't see any way this game doesn't shoot out. Both these offenses are so good. The defenses are not good. I mean, I don't even know what's the worst case outcome for this game, like 28-21 or something. I think that it's very likely to be a high scoring game.
Well, I hope you are right because I am going to have a lot of Amari Cooper, and I'm hoping that I can do something that you didn't do last week and get this correct.
Hey, you know, it'd be funny. What if this week he gets like 3 touchdowns but only 70 receiving yards?
I had one of those happen last year where I definitely had 2 TDs but not 100 yards, which was incredibly frustrating. I tried to amend it to say that if you get a second touchdown, like you just win automatically. It's like a point, it's like a fantasy point threshold. Like you're not mad that he didn't get it.
No, it should be worth 60 receiving yards just based on fantasy points.
Yeah. Well, former co-host of mine, Chris Spags, said, not so fast, my friend. So let's move it on to wide receivers now. First prop I have straight from No House Advantage, and this is a big one. Had a monster day last week. This time Julio Jones out. How do you feel about the prop of 5.5 receptions, 75.5 yards for Calvin Ridley?
Yeah, give me the over on both of those, especially with Julio Jones out. Actually, I mean, one of the things I've been working on since we've started this is updating my CSVs for FanDuel and DraftKings to get more exposure to Calvin Ridley, because I went from having not very much exposure to Calvin Ridley to a lot more than 0 exposure to Calvin Ridley as the show started, just because I'm looking at that at the offense and how they're going to run without Julio Jones. And even though I have a little bit of concern with more attention of the defense being focused on Calvin Ridley, there is so much value at running back this week that it just makes a lot of sense to spend up for DeAndre Hopkins, Amari Cooper, Calvin Ridley in lineups. So I have a decent amount of Ridley. He's also going to be pretty somewhat popular. So I'm about even with the field. It's not like I have a massive amount of leverage on him one way or the other, but he was somebody who I had not a lot of, to somebody who I definitely wanted to get exposure to once Julio Jones was out.
Yeah, I wish I would have had more Calvin Ridley last week, that's for sure. I had a little bit, like 10%, but I had 40 and change of Julio. Would have been really nice to invert those two guys.
Yeah, or it would have been nice if Julio Jones didn't get hurt. That would have also helped a little bit.
Also true. I have 8.5% Calvin Ridley right now. That's just going to be relatively neutral. He's not one of the guys that I have a ton of, at the very least. One other prop to touch on. It's the same prop. 5.5 receptions, 75.5 yards. How do you feel about Allen Robinson today?
Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting one because the Falcons defense, so we have the first positive COVID test is one of the cornerbacks for the Falcons, and their other starting cornerback is also out. So a really compromised defense. It's so hard for me to trust Mitchell Trubisky, though, because he's had one very, very good quarter so far this year. The fourth quarter, his first game of the season. Outside of that, he's just been kind of not very good, especially last week against the Giants. He threw 2 interceptions in the second half, and who is a worse defense than the Giants? So, I mean, it's not to say that Allen Robinson can have a big game. I have some exposure to him. It's just so hard for me to trust Mitchell Trubisky.
Ooh, that's just harsh. I don't think you're allowed to talk about him like that, given our
I'm
office being in Chicago. I obviously don't have Trubisky.
It's funny too because I turned on Trubisky after he performed well for me, but I just saw it and it was such a discouraging performance where he played well. Where it's like I want almost nothing to do with this guy going forward because he's not running the ball as much as I would have hoped for. I don't trust him to throw the ball. I think there's still a pretty decent chance that Nick Foles takes over as a starting quarterback at some point this season.
Who is your favorite wide receiver play for today? Probably that's not named DeAndre Hopkins, but
let's talk about DeAndre Hopkins for a second also, because when I first looked at the ownership earlier in the week, I was like, well, there's no way I'm going to get to the amount of DeAndre Hopkins the field has. But then I start building lineups and there's so much value elsewhere. It's like I have to pay up for somebody. And then DeAndre Hopkins just makes a ton of sense. And then DeAndre Hopkins ends up being one of my highest owned players anyway. Getting targeted a ridiculous amount in the Cardinals offense to start the year. They also play at such a high pace that's always going to benefit him also. The other thing also related to DeAndre Hopkins is I bet him to lead the league in receiving yards this year. There's still props out there that are like 10 or 11 to 1 on DeAndre Hopkins, which I think is ridiculous given the amount of targets he's getting. And that we came into this week with Devontae Adams as the number 1 favorite and Julio Jones as the number 2 favorite. Both of them are hurt right now. So that just automatically, in my eyes, puts value on DeAndre Hopkins. But that aside, I just look at how the slate sets up, and it's really hard for me to get away from DeAndre Hopkins. The Detroit Lions do not have a good pass defense. The Cardinals are throwing the ball a ton. A lot of those targets are going to Hopkins. I get the ownership's high, but I'm there also.
Yeah, I'm neutral on the field. I have 30%. We have him projected for 33.5. He's just on a different level compared to every other wide receiver that's on the slate today. I think it's easier to get away from someone like DK Metcalf at 15% ownership than getting away from Hopkins at his ownership. Now, it's hard to go over the field on Hopkins. Another good piece of this for me is that I don't have Murray. So I'm hoping that from the Cardinals' perspective, one of those two guys, whether that's Hopkins or Drake, is the guy that goes crazy. I don't have lineups with both of those guys in their lineup. I don't have lineups with those guys with Kyler. So I just need one of those two guys to blow up and I will be quite happy about it. So Q's 3-point game today.
I mean, with the amount of targets that Hopkins is getting, it's within the realm of possibility he puts up like a 12 for 95 line with a touchdown or something like that, where Kyler Murray doesn't go ridiculous and Hopkins still plays really well. I mean, I'm not in the same boat as you because I don't have 0 Kyler Murray, so I wouldn't necessarily want that to happen as you do. But yeah, I mean, there is an avenue where Hopkins scores a ton of points just based on the amount of targets and receptions he's probably going to get.
And generally speaking, I don't care too much about not having a quarterback. There's going to be a couple options of guys that score, enough points that you need. What I really need to just avoid is Kyler Murray rushing touchdowns. If he scores rushing touchdowns, that's when it gets problematic. If his touchdowns are from a passing perspective, there's a decent chance that it's Drake or Hopkins. I don't think that I have Fitzgerald anywhere. I do not. And obviously Kirk out. So, okay. Any other wide receivers that you want to touch on? I'll just let you know now. My most exposed wide receivers: Amari Cooper, Tyler Lockett, Adam Thielen, N'Keal Harry, which I hate so much. I'm still waiting to find out that at 12:59 he's getting yanked.
He's one of my higher owned cheap receivers. I also have a decent amount of Damir Bird just because I'm not sure how healthy Harry is. Harry, even though he's expected to play, does come into the day listed questionable on the injury report. I do find it a little interesting that he's projected for so much ownership. I have a feeling that number is going to actually end up being lower than what is projected as, just because I think when somebody's questionable heading into lock and there is that kind of uncertainty, I think people just kind of get skittish as they're finally entering their lineups. And I think that will lower him a little bit. If he's healthy, I do think he's a good play because, like we said, Cam Newton's playing well so far this year, and the wide receivers are so cheap for the Patriots outside of Julian Edelman. And even Edelman's relatively cheap for a wide receiver, one who's getting as much volume as he is at 6,200. But then we've got N'Keal Harry at 4,200. Damir Bird, who's actually playing more snaps than any of the wide receivers on the team, he's 3,000. So I think that Bird also is a pretty good value play, and I'm a little surprised that Bird isn't actually getting ownership than Harry is.
Yeah, I have 11% Bird right now. I have a lot more of N'Keal Harry. It's not comfortable for me. Really hoping for just a ton of receptions, get a lot of that PPR work. And if he can get in the end zone, that's just going to be absolutely massive. Let's move on to tight ends. This is just a crapshoot position for me. I have seven tight ends: Hunter Henry, Hayden Hurst, Darren Waller, Zach Ertz, Chris Herndon, Dallas Goedert, Logan Thomas. They're the only tight ends I have. They're all relatively the same ownership, somewhere from like 10 to 20% on everybody. I don't really have much of a hot take. I think Darren Waller is the best option. He's also the most owned option, but at 11.5%, it's really not all that problematic. What do you like at tight end for today?
Yeah, it's pretty hard for me to get away from Darren Waller, just in terms of, I look at the tight ends here and I don't know what to make of a lot of them. And at least with Darren Waller, he got a gazillion targets last week. It seemed like Derek Carr was looking for him every single time he dropped back. I think there were some individual drives that the Raiders had on Monday Night Football where I felt like they only threw to Darren Waller. They had entire drives where there was one spot where Josh Jacobs briefly left the game with an injury, and they just threw the ball to Darren Waller every single play, and there was really no answer for it. So even though it's a really tough matchup against the Patriots, I think that Darren Waller could end up with a big game just by the nature of him putting up, like 8 catches for 70 yards or something like that. And there's just no other tight ends that I look at as really being anywhere near the same upside as him. I agree with you. I think Hunter Henry's in play. Zach Ertz. Hayden Hurst should be able to get a couple extra targets now that Julio Jones is out, so I think he's viable. Logan Thomas was massively disappointing last week, but he's still cheap. I think he's okay. I have a little bit of Dan Arnold just because I think the Cardinals are going to throw the ball a lot. And I mean, if the ball doesn't go to Kenyan Drake, it doesn't go to DeAndre Hopkins in the air. Who else is going to go to? I think that Dan Arnold is viable. So yeah, I just mixed in a bunch of. There's no one play that I have a ton of conviction in. Darren Waller would be the number one guy. It's still, he has high ownership, tough matchup against the Patriots. So it's hard for me to be overweight to the field on him. I just kind of mixed and matched there.
Because of my exposure to Cam, that's part of the reason that I've got a lot of Josh Jacobs, a lot of Darren Waller. Not that I think Waller, I think Waller grades out as a fantastic tight end regardless, but because of the way that I'm forcing my builds, those two guys fly to the top. That's about as good of a two-man bring back option as you can find in Jacobs and Waller. Oh, Logan Thomas, do something this week. It'd be very helpful. Do you have a defense take that you want to get in right now? I don't. I can tell you who I have. That doesn't necessarily make me excited. The Texans are $2,100. That is pretty scary against Pittsburgh, but it's $2,100 and it's defense. I also have quite a bit of the Cleveland Browns. It's the Redskins. Oops, it's the football team. I'm going to do that forever. They've been my team since 1991. It's going to be hard to break that one from my lexicon. Browns and Texans, two teams that I'm going to. Browns, you're paying up for. Texans, not so much. What are you doing at defense?
Yeah, I mean, there's no defense I have a whole lot of conviction in. I know you won't like this, but I do think the Patriots are viable going up against the Raiders. I mean, we go back to last year. Remember, the Patriots had a few slates where they absolutely broke slates last year to open the year. I think they have that kind of potential against the Raiders. But once again, not really a whole lot of conviction there. A defense that nobody's on this week that I think makes sense, the San Francisco 49ers. So the Giants offense, at least per Pro Football Focus, they've had the worst offensive line in the league so far this year. Daniel Jones is probably the most mistake-prone quarterback in the league. There are some books that have props for which quarterback will have the most turnovers this year, and Daniel Jones is the overwhelming favorite, and for good reason. It seems that he can't get in this position where he doesn't throw a dumb interception. He doesn't fumble the ball at least once per game. And given how bad the Giants' offensive line is, even if the 49ers' offense and defense are both a little bit banged up, I think there's a chance for them to get to Daniel Jones, because I think any defense has a chance to get to Daniel Jones. And there's going to be times, maybe once or twice a game, where Daniel Jones just kind of gives the ball to the defense. I wouldn't be surprised to see defenses score touchdowns against the Giants somewhat regularly this season, just based on how much I think the Giants will turn the ball over. So, I mean, the 49ers projecting for almost no ownership, and that's really why I'm on them. It's no ownership and a mistake-prone young quarterback.
Yeah, I have 7%, casting a kind of a wide net, a little bit concentrated at the top, but I do get to a bit of the Niners, more so than the field at the very least. It's really tough to just prioritize defenses. Is there anything else you want to touch on for the entirety of the slate? Quarterbacks, running backs, wideouts, roster construction, stacks, anything that jumps out to you that you want to get in?
We didn't talk about the Cowboys receivers yet. I think that's pretty big because that's a game I'm stacking. I'm sure you're stacking. Everybody's stacking. There's going to be most likely a ton of points scored in Amari Cooper there. The second wide receivers, I'm a little surprised to see. Let me see if this has changed.
Cooper and Lockett, my top 2 wide receivers, by the way. So yeah, I'm in for this conversation. Obviously Lockett not on the Cowboys, but you know what I mean.
Michael Gallup projected for more ownership than really understand. CeeDee Lamb has been more involved in the offense so far this year. It's only been 2 weeks, but I mean, CeeDee Lamb was a really good prospect coming out of college. They spent a first-round pick on him, and he's gotten more targets than Gallup so far. Gallup's the 3rd wide receiver on the team, yet we look at the prices on them where Gallup is, I mean, it's only $100, but Gallup more expensive than Lamb, projected for more ownership, and he's been less productive so far this year. I don't totally get that. I prefer Lamb between the two. So I guess that's kind of my contrarian-ish type play in those stacks, is going with more exposure to CeeDee Lamb over Michael Gallup.
I oddly have a very minimal amount of both of those guys, and it's making me a little nervous right now.
I mean, if you're taking a stand on Amari Cooper, that makes sense because Cooper isn't that much more expensive. I mean, he's only $1,000 more. I have a lot more exposure to Cooper than I have to the other guys, but I have, and I'm with you, I have a lot more exposure. I have, let's see. Yeah, I have
Dak is also my lowest exposed quarterback. So much of this is Russell Wilson stacks, at which point Cooper is the priority coming back.
Yeah, so I mean, I have about twice as much exposure to Cooper as I have to Lamb, but I have more exposure to Lamb than the field, and I have almost no Michael Gallup. I have like a few lines with Gallup, but nothing significant. I just think that the ownership and the pricing is all a little off there based on what we've seen through 2 weeks.
Go Amari Cooper for multiple reasons. Exposure in my DFS lineups, 100 yards and a touchdown pick. Just need it. You want to take some questions?
Let's do it.
612 likes, 2,100 concurrent viewers, which means it's time for you guys to hit that thumbs up, and it's time to answer some questions. So let's dive in. If you're in premium Slack, drop your questions in. Happy to answer. If you are in YouTube chat, considering the amount of likes we have right now, I'm happy to answer those questions as well. You guys are helping us out a ton, so let's help you guys out on the other side. Do you like OBJ today?
You know what? Yes and no. I mean, if you throw him into lineups, I wouldn't hate it. I didn't get there, but I could see the reason for it. It's a little concerning what he said earlier in the week. I don't know if anybody caught this soundbite, which I don't necessarily make a ton of decisions off that, but he basically just admitted to, he's like, hey, I'm not going to put up the same numbers I did in the past, and that's okay. And I don't want to say that means that he's a bad fantasy play for the rest of the year, but it definitely means that I think the Browns are prioritizing the running game more than they are the passing game. Beckham's aware of it. I think most people are aware of that also. They have maybe the best 1-2 running back combination in the league with Kareem Hunt and
Chubb.
And with Chubb, yeah, totally brain farted there. But I do think that's just how we've seen them set up their offense so far, is they're running the ball a lot more. It's really tough to trust Baker Mayfield, and I think they feel that as a team also. He makes a ton of mistakes, and I think that it just makes more sense, especially if they have the lead, to just grind the ball out on the more than usual. So I think that Beckham is okay. I didn't get there, but I wouldn't say that if you have him in your line, you have to take him out or anything.
I don't have him as well, so I will say you shouldn't play him. I'm happy to regret it, but I don't have him, so best I can do is just tell you what I'm doing. Let's see what else we've got coming in. Okay, this is kind of a general question, but I think it's good. What is your core group of running backs on DraftKings? I'll let you start.
Let's see. So I think Miles Sanders is number one for me this week. There are some ownership concerns, but particularly if you play cash games, you just have to roster Miles Sanders this week. The matchup's great. The price is great. Outside of him, Devin Singletary, Jerick McKinnon, Kenyan Drake, and Mike Davis.
Working from top to bottom for me, this is everybody I have in more than 20% of my lineups. Devin Singletary, Josh Jacobs, Miles Sanders, David Johnson, Kenyan Drake, Melvin Gordon. Melvin Gordon one scares the hell out of me.
I mean, you know what's interesting about Melvin Gordon? I think he's going to get a lot of volume at least. So I think the floor is pretty high. The downside with Melvin Gordon is that he's bad and the offense is bad. So so that's always going to be a little bit of a limiting factor. But I think that he's going to get enough work in both the rush game and the passing game that he could do okay. There's just other running backs I prefer to him.
Yeah, my problem was just 5,800 is a really desirable salary structure for him, given where we have him projected. But those are our running back cores. So let's see what else we've got coming in. 12 minutes to go until lock. So if you don't have your lineups in yet, get working, guys. You want to get them in now. You don't want to be left with dummy lineups. That's rarely a good sign. Hopkins or Ridley for cash? To me, that's not a question. It's Hopkins.
Hopkins, yeah. The other thing, too, is there's going to be such a big difference in ownership between the two. And Hopkins also I have as a better per dollar play, better overall play. Here's the issue. If you don't roster Hopkins and he has a big game, you lost your cash games because everybody's going to have him in cash.
Yeah, he will be one of the 3 most owned players in cash, I would imagine. Some combination of him, Miles Sanders, and Kyler would be my guess. Although Kyler, a little bit different. Quarterback can be a bit more spread out. Let's see what else we've got. Thoughts on KJ Hamler?
Not somebody I ended up with exposure to. I just think there's better value plays.
Who's the guy that you have? This isn't a question coming in. Who's the guy that you have the most of that no one has?
Let's see. Let me compare. What's the definition of nobody has?
Like 5% or lower ownership, something in that neighborhood.
Let's see. 5%.
If you see somebody at 5.1, I'm not going to be mad at you.
Let me sort by ownership. Where's Damir Bird at in terms of projected ownership? Because it could be Damir Bird if he.
Damir Bird. Last I saw, Damir Bird was at 4.6.
All right, so it's Damir Bird then.
Okay, there we go. Damir Bird. Jannar, I apologize. I did miss your super chat, and I hope I'm saying it right as Jannar. Love the show. Johnson or Gage for D Johnson or Gage for DK Cash. So I'm assuming that's David Johnson. I would probably recommend neither of those guys, at least at first blush, but I have quite a bit of David Johnson. So at the very least, I like one of the guys that you mentioned. I'm not so sure that I would be getting to David Johnson or Gage in a cash game.
Yeah, I also have more exposure to David Johnson than I do to Gage, so I'll go with David Johnson. Also agree with you, though, that I don't think either of them make for particularly good cash plays. Actually, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to look. So he is 5,400. I'm trying to find if there's anybody else that I think makes for a much better play in that price range. CeeDee Lamb, I think, is a better play. Darren Waller, if you could get to him in the flex spot, he's 5,700. I think that he's a much better cash play. I don't necessarily love CeeDee Lamb in cash either. I also don't want to tell somebody to totally rebuild their lineups 9 minutes before lock. Sure. Yeah, I'll say, to answer your question, he was probably saying, was he saying Deontay Johnson?
It is Deontay Johnson. Okay. Yes.
All right. So Deontay Johnson, I think, is preferable to Russell Gage.
Agreed. I definitely prefer Deontay Johnson to Russell Gage. I think Deontay Johnson is certainly a more viable cash option. Good catch. Chat's getting to it now. Deontay Johnson. Can't just be going D Johnson. That's like one of the most common names you can give us. Smith versus Williams. Who you got?
Do you like M. Williams?
Yeah. But Jannar, thank you for the super chat. We really appreciate it. Singletary or Taylor in cash?
Well, those guys are in way different price ranges.
Yeah. The answer is probably Taylor on the surface, but Singletary is going to be a lot easier to get in. I have Singletary.
Yeah,
I have Singletary, Miles Sanders, I have Singletary and Miles Sanders as my 2 running backs in my cash lineup.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out where you'd be comparing them because there's a $2,100 price difference between them on DraftKings and an $800 price difference between them on FanDuel. I do think that Jonathan Taylor is the higher floor play today. It just depends what's the opportunity cost of going up to him in salary, or if you're just leaving a bunch of money on the table, that's not really advised either.
What else do we have coming in? 7 minutes to go. Get those questions in. All right, 661 likes. Hit that thumbs up. It's the last time I'm going to ask, can we get to 700? That's 39 more. I don't think that's a crazy ask. 39 people just have to click a thumbs up. How hard is that? I hope you can do that. Thumbs up.
Yeah, I'll make myself one of them. I'll make myself one of them right now.
Lofty saying in the chat, Josh claims to be the king of likes, but still isn't at 700. I didn't see that before my plug. So don't let Lofty think that he's like sly and cool by slipping into chat right now. Get to 700 so I can rub it in his
don't let
face.
Don't let him discourage people from. Don't like shame people.
Yeah, I don't appreciate it at all. Peter Wyatt in Premium Slack asks, Henry or Cook or neither?
So let's see. I have more exposure to Dalvin Cook today. I think that both are viable and are a little bit ways to differentiate yourself, particularly on DraftKings from the field, because everybody's going cheaper at running back. But yeah, I think that Dalvin Cook is fine against the Titans today.
Okay, two things. One, we got to 727 likes, and now Lofty is in chat taking credit for it. That is nonsense.
Oof.
Nonsense.
Can we ban him? Who's the ability to ban Lofty?
I mean, I do, but he is also a moderator in chat, so I think he can undo that immediately.
Okay.
But yes,
that could be problematic for us in other ways if we start banning moderators.
Well, sometimes do it when you go off the rails like that. Circling back to that Cook versus Derrick Henry question, I have them identical. Now, I have a little bit more Derrick Henry just in general. Derrick Henry and Dalvin Cook both finished in the optimal lineup in my simulations 13.1% of the time. Literally the exact same. So, what are you going to do? Hey, guys, by the way, 752 likes. Can we get to 800? I didn't think I was going to ask again.
Not if Lofty has anything to do with it.
Yeah, I have 7%, 7% Cook, 10% Henry. So they're, just coin flippy. Who did Josh lock for 100? That would be Amari Cooper.
Yeah, Josh went with Amari Cooper, and I went with Miles Sanders.
I like both of those. I need both of those plays, honestly. So I hope we both look smart next Sunday for this.
Yeah, I mean that would be nice. That would be a nice mix up.
What else do we have here? Any final questions? 5 minutes to go. Oh, come on, guys. Chat's all saying that all the likes are for Lofty. This is nonsense.
All right,
guys, if you wanted to give Lofty all of these likes, where the hell were you at 10 o'clock in the morning when he was on the show? You weren't here hitting the thumbs up. You came for myself and for Greg, not for Lofty. You didn't know Lofty was going to be in here trolling our chat. You just didn't show up to watch his show. You're speaking my language right now. The likes are coming because of us, not because of his chat prompts. It's nonsense.
So if we don't have any other questions, who is the player that you did not get to this week that is most likely to ruin your week 3?
Ezekiel Elliott. I have 4%, but just given the way that I have my exposure set up, given it's sort of everything, given my exposure to Russell Wilson, even like Zeke didn't show up, even on bringbacks. So Zeke is the guy that like makes me most nervous. 16.5% ownership, and I have 1/4 of that in a situation where I have a lot of that game. So I'm betting very heavily on Amari Cooper.
Reasonable.
Hopefully. I don't like it, man. It's scary. But look, I could either get wrecked playing a very balanced amount of guys across my lineups, or I can get wrecked playing a very concentrated amount of Amari Cooper. Either way, it's a race to the bottom. Randy Sayers says, Zeke scares me this week. Yeah, me too. Me too. Is 80% Mike Davis too much?
It's aggressive, but I like Mike Davis a lot this week. I think if there's one low-owned running back that you want to take a stand on, I don't have an issue with it being Mike Davis. I also have quite a bit more Mike Davis in the field. I think that he is massive PPR upside in this matchup.
There is no reason that you should be playing 80% Mike Davis. I'm going to put that out there right now.
Yeah, I mean, 80% on anybody is really high, but it also depends on if he's playing 5 lineups and he's Mike Davis in 4 of them, then it's maybe not so ridiculous.
Also true. Josh is the man, but Lofty is a legend. Ugh. Don't like it. Fade Cooper. Josh went 1 for 8 first 9 weeks last year, if I remember right. I mean, just say I went 0 for 8 in the first 8 weeks. That'll probably make your point a little bit easier.
1 for 1 as far back as I can remember, though.
Yeah, look, I'm 1 for 2 this year, batting 500. We got my most recent pick right. If you bat 500, you go to the Hall of Fame. So I am on a Hall of Fame pace. Even if I get this one wrong, and let's just hope that I don't, given my Amari Cooper ownership, I'll still be hitting 333. That's fantastic. What an incredible, it'd be like Tony Gwynn. I'm just good. Deontay Johnson and Kyler Murray, or Carson Wentz and Allen Robinson and DK Cash. This is not even up for debate.
It was Kyler Murray and Deontay Johnson. Yeah, that's the answer.
Yes, it is. Laffy is, does that say the GOAT or a GOAT? Yeah, Laffy is a GOAT. I don't know what that totally entails, but he's definitely not the greatest of all time.
What is he the greatest of all time at?
I don't know.
He's the greatest moderator of all time. I guess
not getting as many likes as us.
Hey, you got to stake your claim somewhere. He's the
best. 798.
Probably 800 by now.
Guys, 2 of you. We need 2 of you to hit the thumbs up. We're going to be locked in 20 seconds. Can we get to 800 before? Oh man, we just lost 2 likes. I guess I should have shut up. It went from 798 to 796. To the 2 jerks that just unliked this video, you should have came at 10 o'clock and unliked it for Laffy.
What percentage of your self-worth is likes in YouTube videos?
Most, if not all.
Yeah, I got that. I got that vibe off you.
Yeah. I never really thought about it, and all of a sudden it just started working. So it's just becoming my thing now.
Yeah, Josh doesn't need lunch. He just needs 300 more likes on a YouTube video, and that's enough sustenance for him for the rest of the day. Yeah, that's how I get paid. Every time somebody hits that button, I get another $1 from Awesemo.com. Now we're never going to get another like on a YouTube
video. It's an $840 show, people. It's not true, guys. It's not true. We're up, 847. Good work. We are locked. Let's go watch some football. Thank you for joining us. Greg and I will be back next Sunday doing the same thing, talking about how we both got our 100 yards and the touchdown picks correct. I'm going to go sweat a little bit of football. I'm going to enjoy myself, eat a little food, and then I will be back for NBA Live Before Lock later tonight. Do you have anything going on tonight?
I've got the NFL Live Before Lock for the Showdown slate.
Speaking of Showdown slate, DraftKings Showdown video posted earlier this morning. FanDuel single game slate video posted this morning. Watch them both, then watch NFL Live Before Lock. Good luck today, guys. We are out of here.